Trevor Henderson has an absolutely massive catalog of disturbing entities, and I've made tons of videos covering what it would be like if they were real throughout the years, and I want to go ahead and make these into one giant mega compilation that you guys can sleep to or play in the background and not have to worry about clicking on another video. But don't worry, a completely new video will be dropping as soon as possible. I'm just working on getting my internet up to par at my new place. For a while, there were only a few things on the internet able to creep me out, mostly analog horror and the occasional psychological horror. That was until Trevor Henderson. Trevor Henderson is easily one of the most disturbing horror artists on the internet. Half the time, it's hard to tell whether these entities are drawings or whether they really exist in hiding in the darkest corners of our world. Now, being serious, I'm curious to if any of these creatures, if they did exist, if logic could be used to survive every single Trevor Henderson creature based on location, physical characteristics, and the minimal lore behind some of these images. And, of course, putting them onto the signature we're fuck scale. Can I trademark that? Questions for later. Now, this would turn out to be a lot more difficult than I thought, because looking at the list, there are 45 canon creatures, and at least 10 of them are like massive Titanic-sized beings that I don't even know where to start on how to survive. So this is going to be a long video. Regardless, welcome. I'm Mr.Mirage, and this is a logical approach to Trevor Henderson creatures. Now, even if you're completely unfamiliar with Trevor Henderson's creatures as a whole, you probably know Siren Head, because it has become one of his most popular phenomenons, being the giant siren-like creature that uses its siren noises along with its telephone-like structure in order to lure walkers and hikers. It often is depicted as hiding in dense woods, dark roads, or foggy rural areas. The most popular sound Siren Head makes is that of a broken tornado alarm that went viral a few years back because of its eerie nature. The biggest threat around Siren Head lies in how tall the entity is. If you're unfamiliar, the rule of thumb is the longer the legs, the faster it gets from, hey, look at that weird siren down the street, to, oh shit. So it's a very important factor that shouldn't be overlooked. Along with its ability to camouflage physically, like looking like various lampposts and street poles, and verbally, when it uses sirens and calls to lure you. To get an idea of how fast Siren Head's legs can carry it, we should look at the only living creature with legs even close to long enough to match its stride. Since giraffes can move about 20 to 40 miles per hour, it is safe to assume that Siren Head can move roughly the same, and the wiki confirms this. Which, just in case you're familiar with the limits of the human body, he's gonna catch you. So, the only way that I could see being able to survive a creature that big is actually using his height against him, as he would be unable to access areas like buildings with small doors. So, really, any area inside is an ideal option. It's assumed the flexibility of his arms are very limited, because as he may be able to, say, flip cars, there's no way he has the strength to be able to plow through solid concrete buildings. So that would honestly be your safest bet. Now, if you're wondering, well, what if he attacks you in a field or a rural area? Well, to answer this, I would say it depends on the outdoor area. In a rural setting, Siren Head can easily camouflage, giving you less time to escape. The key would be using logical thinking when hearing a siren. For example, would a tornado siren make sense in the middle of hilly forest, or would a hurricane siren make sense in a landlocked state, or maybe even an air raid siren in a time of peace? Stuff like that. Regardless, the next step would be to quickly locate something you can hide under, like a protruding rock, cave, brush, or small tree, and make sure you are not visible from above. This will make it harder for Siren Head to locate you, and depending on your hiding spot, reach you. Before we move forward, I think it's important to go over a few things. Mostly, Siren Head, I think due to its popularity, has one of the most information on it out of any of his other creatures. So once we go deeper and darker into his less known canon creatures, you're going to start to see less and less of that same luxury. Some creatures have full wiki pages on them, others consist of simply the image alone, as the majority of all information stems from the captions Trevor himself posted on his Twitter. For these videos, we will be going off of only the wiki articles, Trevor's tweets, and the visual clues I can deduct from the image itself. Now, with that being said, I apologize if a lot of my logical guesses or assumptions don't quite match the headcanons y'all have about it, because I know a lot of times people will see these images and they'll write their own stories that aren't necessarily canon, and I don't want to ruin that for you guys, but I don't know everyone's story, and I'm not going to go research every single lore and story that fans made about every image. So I'm just going to be using specifically what's in the image and on the tweets, and using that to make the best guess I can. Now, Trevor himself stated in a tweet that there are officially 45 confirmed canon creatures, and since I don't have the work ethic of Wendigoon to make a 3-hour video, I'm going to be grouping each creature into 6 classes, with some honorable mentions towards the end, that I still think are cool despite not being on his official canon list. Starting with the class I think poses less of a threat than they might appear. Now, picture walking down the stairs in your house at night, possibly to make sure your doors are locked, or even for just a snack. And then all of a sudden you hear something bumping around. You go to check it out, but instead of what you were expecting, like a burglar or something, you are met with a horse skull that seems to be impossibly long. So much that you can't even see where it stops. Obviously, you're going to try to run around your house to get away from it, but no matter what, it always just seems to be right behind you, still never ending. Desperate, you bolt out onto the street only to see this horrific entity is still following you. Only something is wrong, very wrong. Even under the streetlight, it seems to be without end. You still can't even comprehend what you're looking at, yet it just sits there, almost curious. Suddenly, you are struck by an oncoming truck and killed. This entity, despite horrific, is the unexplainable Long Horse, and the first of the Guardian class. Unlike every other creature, the ones in the Guardian class don't aim to harm humans. Most of them are rather protective and will only lash out in defense. Now, I recommend you enjoy this section and take any comfort you possibly can in these creatures, because it only gets way worse from here. These creatures are so harmless, in fact, that some of them, such as the Watchtower, will even go as far as protecting humans. Which, I don't know if that's supposed to make me feel safe, but, you know, I still would not like to be within 100 miles of these things. But regardless, I know there are a lot of people that really like Long Horse, despite it technically being considered a bad omen that simply is meant to be a warning of something bad to happen in the future, which still, like I said, doesn't make me feel much better. This class consists of 5 entities total. Big Charlie and Little Nugget are some of the first assumably related entities. It is assumed that Big Charlie, who is supposedly a mutated cow from a slaughterhouse experiment gone wrong, would only be hostile if attacked, or if you were to say, I don't know, punt Little Nugget. This is just the general rule of thumb when it comes to aggressive animals. If it's near something it's defending, like its child, leave it be, and then it will leave you be. Similarly, the god of chickens is supposed to be a guardian of chickens, so just don't roam the streets eating chicken or randomly murder a fuckload of chickens and you should be fine. Now, there is a creature that I almost can put in this category, but not quite, known as the lamb, because it is supposedly harmless, but it can cause extreme psychic damage and blood clots if you're near it for too long. But Trevor himself stated in a tweet that you can actually just run away from it, as it does take a long time to do anything to you and it is extremely slow. But since it is supposed to be another relative or offspring, if you will, of Big Charlie, I think it's important to mention that here. These creatures, since they pose virtually no harm, I'm going to put it at a 1 on the we're fucked scale. I hope y'all found comfort in that class, because it's the most tame we're going to get. It only goes downhill from here. You know, There's going to be a time eventually where I don't fuck up every other word and have to redo a part a million times. Y'all don't see the behind the scenes shit, but if you did, you'd be horrified. Like, it is not fun. In order to get a vision on what the stationary class is, let's say you're doing some urban exploring with a bit of friends. You're in this old, abandoned, what must be some sort of daycare, and everything's going fine until you see a room labeled the Smile Room above it. This room is blatantly creepier than the rest and takes a lot of coercing. Still, one of your friends is ushered inside, and suddenly a giant pair of teeth slam down behind him. You are thrown back, not believing what you're seeing. For a second, the room is silent. No screaming, no begging, or pleading. Your friend is just gone. And before you can react, the teeth eject itself from the door, filling the hallway, slothing its way towards the other two of your friends, devouring them whole. You bolt down the hallway, desperate to get the hell away from there, and it follows you everywhere. Downstairs, through halls, until eventually you lose it. It's quiet again, until eventually you hear the footsteps of your friend coming. Was this all a bad dream? But the figure shambling towards you is no longer your friend. This is the Smile Room, the first example of what I like to call the stationary class. Now, this class is made up mostly of its tether to one location, and there is a good chance you will not see this entity outside of that location, whether it be a specific neighborhood, a specific building, or just one general area. Now, I know what you're going to say. I'm going to get a million comments for this, so for the first time, I'm just going to say it in the video. Yes, the most logical way to survive this class would just be not going there. I know. But that is assuming that you already knew about the location and that there was an entity there before you entered the building. And since logically, unless you're a professional cryptid hunter, you won't be seeing a giant sign on the door that says something like, "Warning, creepy ass teeth inside." So for the stationary class, we're using logic to escape rather than to avoid or attack. The Smile Room is stated to have the ability to occupy any closed room or space. So the solution to this would be, ideally, to get away from liminal passageways such as doorways, hallways, stairs, and even windows. Your overall goal for the Smile Room should be to get outside, but since it has the ability to fill windows and doors, you wouldn't want to do that, as it could just grab you as you're walking out the door. The way I think is the best way to avoid this is to distract it by making it into its humanoid form, where it would take too long for it to fill that doorway and you could have time to escape. The best way I think of doing this is by going to a place it cannot reach you. It is able to fill hallways and doorways, but it wouldn't be able to fill an entire huge room. So a gym or a theater or of some sort would honestly be the best way to do that. Then once it becomes that human form, you take advantage of that time and quickly bolt outside. Now, I believe we would be safe outside only because the teeth are said to belong to a mysterious giant entity on the other side of a sort of wormhole that is on the brink of death from assumably starvation, so it would be unable to waste energy chasing you down. Okay, so do y'all remember earlier when I said some of these have absolute dick diddly for information on them? Well, the Hokkaido hands are the first, but unfortunately not the last. So I'm going to have to infer that the hands simply are used for grabbing you and pulling you somewhere undesirable. Now, to me, the best plan for this would be wearing some sort of loose clothing so that if and when they somehow manage to grab you, you can simply let them grab your outer layer and then take it off, and then they would be grabbing that and you could then get away. Up next, we have the Whole House and the Whole Man, who honestly needs to be careful before I act up. It appears to be a humanoid creature lurking in a basement with very stubby legs. So a broom or another household item that is long like that could easily be jammed into its orifice and used to knock it off its stubby legs, giving you a chance to then escape the house. Our next entity is a creature that appears inside of the houses of a single neighborhood randomly, but it assumably is limited to that one location, similar to the alternates in Mandela catalog being limited to mostly Mandela County. Although, since this thing kind of seems like its biggest weapon is a pair of scissors, you could honestly just do the most American thing and shoot it with a freaking pistol. Or if that isn't your thing, you could always just tell it to not bring scissors to a machete fight and then bring the bigger weapon, which obviously wouldn't be compensating for something. The next two I'm going to loop together, as one seems to be specific to classrooms and schools and one seems to be specific to theaters, in which my answer is the same. If you are in either of these places at night, I think you have bigger problems and you deserve to die. And as for the last one, known as the Man in the Red Room, it can manipulate your dreams and coerce you into releasing them from its prison. I think it is important to mention that I hate this thing so much. The thought of a giant stringy thing going through the ceilings in a room lit only by a red dim light is the most horrific thing that I could possibly ever think of. Now, the trick to this one would just be, don't listen to anything it says, because it is specifically stated that it cannot escape by itself, which is why it needs human interference. I don't know exactly how it escapes or what would happen if it did escape, so if you honestly don't care about that, you could just let it go and then it would probably leave you alone. But at the same time, it's probably better not to release a random eldritch abomination from its prison on your own accord. I mean, if you want to have that blood in your hands, go ahead. Overall, this class is only slightly more dangerous, but I wouldn't say it's quite as bad as anything else on the list, so I'll give the stationary class a 3. Now, I gotta say, out of all the classes mentioned so far, the digital class I think is the most anomalous and confusing. And if that doesn't make sense to you, picture this. You're surfing the web and downloading random games off the internet, when suddenly you notice an unusual file on your desktop labeled kingbirth.jpg. So, as you should do with random sketchy images, you delete it. The next day when you're opening up your PC, it is back again, but this time it has become more disturbing, breaking apart and now staring at you. The more you try to delete it, the more disturbing it gets. When searching for help, the only response you get is a single sentence. Defeated King is coming soon. Defeated King, along with Bonesworth and the rest of our digital class, reside from or are manifested from technology. The only solution I could possibly make for this one is to, if you see an image on your PC that suggests Defeated King is coming, simply throw every electronic in your house in some sort of pool and then take it to the dump, where it'll get broken up, because it seems like you always have a couple days before it kills you, which is more than enough time to destroy every electronic you own. And people always say, oh yeah, what if it doesn't let you destroy it? Like, it always pisses me off in those movies where they're like, oh yeah, we can't burn it, oh my god. You're not desperate enough. If you're about to get killed by some demonic entity, a volcano should not be off the list. That's just my personal opinion. Now, overall, it is unknown how long you would then have to go without using any electronics, and for some of us, after a few weeks, it would honestly just be worth taking the chances with Defeated King. Overall, this one just kind of reminds me of the intruder from Mandela Catalog. As for Bonesworth, he seems like more like a nuisance than an actual threat, as once you summon him by his app, he will roam your house and do annoying shit like cut your brakes and knock over your ladders while you're on it. Also, he is known to bring insomnia and sickness, which doesn't seem like it's necessarily killing you, but it seems like it's also indirectly killing you. The best way to get rid of Bonesworth would be to send a chain email with links to his game in the hopes that he will find a new quote-unquote favorite and move on from you. Our next two beings assumably originate from what looks to be an old-timey movie or Bendy-era cartoon, being the infamous cartoon cat and dog. Now, unlike the previous entities, they are only in the digital class because they closely resemble cartoons, thus their name. Now, the thing about these two things is I almost didn't cover them, but I knew if I didn't, I would get so many people asking where they are, as they're like almost as popular as Siren Head. So basically, the thing about these things is Trevor himself stated that if you come into contact with them, you're already dead. So for me to try to logically survive these things would be specifically going against the word of the creator, which I'm not even going to bother doing. And I feel like there's been a lot of times in the past, like with the SCP video and the Flesh That Hates, where I spent a lot of time trying to survive something that is unsurvivable. And I feel like that just wastes everybody's time, and I should just be stamping a 10 on it and moving on. The final creature of this class is known as the VHS creature. Now, this creature is known to mostly hunt people in the sewer systems, but it does seem to have the characteristics of 096, that if you view its tape, you die supernaturally. Now, for this one, I honestly think anyone in my generation is safe, because I don't know if I'm the only one that's never actually watched an actual tape in my life. nor do I even own a VHS player. It's not that I don't like them. They seem cool. I mean, I love analog horror, but it's just the fact that I would never buy one of these things, nor do I really know where to buy one of these things. So I think we'd honestly all be safe, unless you're really into that sort of thing, and then just don't watch creepy, decrepit tapes that you find, and you should be safe. But the thing about this thing is the creature itself does not seem to be the humanoid running around in the sewers, as with the VHS entity, there are multiple forms, including this weird deer creature out in the forest. So I feel like the entity is the VHS tape itself, but if you put the VHS itself aside for a second, the sewer creature is extremely agile, but stated to run off of animalistic instincts, which leads me to believe it could probably be intimidated with fire, as most animals are afraid of it, and logically a creature that is accustomed to running around in pitch black sewers and has night vision would be extremely sensitive to bright light. So bringing a bright luminous flashlight or something like that into the sewer when you go and explore it, should you really want to just randomly explore sewers one day, would be the best idea on how to survive this thing. However, there are other forms like I mentioned earlier, the most intimidating being the passerby at night. Now, for this one, instead of going over it specifically, I'm just going to encourage you to use the tips from our next section for this one as well. But overall, I'd give the digital class a solid 8 due to its overall unpredictability and the fact that it possesses two creatures that I could not for the life of me figure out how to survive. Now, up until now, the creatures have been mostly tame and situational. Well, at least compared to our next class, known as the giant class, that, to be honest, makes me want to drop to my knees and pray. Because when you see these things, it's not even comprehensible what you could possibly do next. These Titanic-sized beings are grouped many different ways in Trevor Henderson's wiki, but they are mostly referred to as the giants. The majority of all the creatures show relatively the same characteristics with minor differences, such as the Wandering Faith having the ability to hurl people miles into the air with its tentacles. But I'm going to treat them all, as they are grouped by Trevor, as one entity, as they basically all possess gigantic size, and that's all that really matters. The good news is all these things seem to stay away from largely populated areas to my knowledge, along with them being so incredibly big that we would basically be like ants to them. So the chances of them actually coming to kill us specifically would be low, unless of course they somehow manage to sneak up on you, which would be unlikely. Now, to me, some of these creatures have a sense of peace to them, though they are terrifying, because I feel like it's best when they're monitored safely from a distance, because anywhere closer than like 5 miles from these things would be horrific, and I just would recommend you run away. A huge threat when it does come to these would be the earthquakes and possibly even tsunamis that they would create due to their massive size. So staying away from coasts, along with keeping aware of shaking, and if an earthquake is happening, going outside to avoid being crushed by your own house would low-key be the best option. Overall, these giants could be inescapable if they were aiming to kill you specifically, but unless they have a supernatural reason, you would honestly have to be really unaware or asleep for a long period of time to have them sneak up on you and crush you, or become even close enough to be harmed by these things. So I'll put them on a 3 with the stationary class. Now, it's sort of an overall consensus for these creatures to not be in the dark alone to risk being attacked by them, but this class, that I like to call the Kidnapper class, specifically is focused on catching you outside at night and killing you or taking you, thus the name. I group these entities by the fact that none of them are seen inside, so it is assumable that once inside your home, they will almost all lose interest and leave. So our goal here is going to be figuring out how to disable or outrun these entities long enough to make it home. Now, there are a lot of entities in these next 2 sections, so I'm going to be going over each one more briefly and more quickly in order to save time. Body of a pig is a horrific creature that appears to charge the camera via walking on its hands because its legs seem to have been dislocated from its body. The trick for this one is to take advantage of the fact that it has no legs and has to drag itself by its arms. You would then have to time your blows so when it reaches out for you with one of its arms and is balancing on the other, you could then use a big item or any sort of weapon, or just kick it to be honest, to just knock it off its one leg and then render it unconscious on the ground. Now, you could either use this opportunity to either run away or you could finish it off. It's up to you and whether you take pity on this thing. Now, a lot of fans refer to it as a ghost pig, but is unconfirmed by Trevor, so we're going to go with the fact that it's a physical entity. The next creature likely to attack by walking home is a four-legged mosquito-like creature known as the Needle. Akin to its name, it can move like a horse and drain a human of blood completely. Now, the best way to escape this creature would be actually to make it to the nearest tree and then climb up it. As since this thing does possess a lot of the same attributes that horses do, you would actually be able to hide in this tree for as long as you need it, and I doubt it'd be able to climb after you like many of the other ones could. And since it is specifically said to be elusive and trying specifically to avoid attention, you would just want to stay up there until it eventually felt threatened in that area and then left. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what if I never walk home? What if I always drive home? Would I be safe then? No, not really. As Trevor, of course, made terrifying street monsters too. Mr. Mascot is a fucking 15-foot tall mascot costume that apparently has the soul of a serial killer inside of it. Like, that doesn't sound familiar. I hate this thing so much, it makes me want to scream and cry because I wouldn't know what the hell to do if I saw this thing in the street other than just attempting to run it over in a panic. But I low-key be afraid of it latching onto my car and then pulling me out and eating me the second it got the opportunity. God, this thing's a nightmare. So honestly, the only possible solution I could see is to light this abomination on fire using a lighter, flamethrower, or any high-grade explosive. Honestly, anything. Just get this thing away from me. Our next one is my favorite cryptid in this list, known as the God of Roadkill. Because, in my opinion, this thing's design is by far the most badass looking out of all the other creatures. And since this thing is specified to be a deity, the only way to avoid being killed by this thing would be to drive incredibly slow and avoid hitting it or any sort of roadkill or animal in the street, as then it would cause your car to crash. Now, the bridge worm is, I'm sure, one that everyone has been waiting for, as it is an extremely popular creature. It essentially is an insanely long worm that hides underneath bridges only to jump out and grab crossers. Now, this one is a tricky one due to the unpredictable nature and how big it is, so my best advice for this one would be just to choose areas that don't have bridges. However, if you're going on a route that requires a bridge, it would be best to go with somebody else, so then you could, how do I say this? Moving on, our final entity in this category is known by the Storm Warning entity, which is essentially Mothman with lightning powers. So the best solution would be to wear rubber clothing and avoid metal items to prevent lightning from striking you. So that's about it. You should be able to make it home and safe from all these entities, except, as you probably guessed, by the name of our final class, the horror is just beginning. And as for the rating, this class does have a lot of curveballs, but they're all kind of avoidable for the most part, so I would give it a 6. Being the final class of Trevor's creatures and containing a majority of them, the Home Invader class, as the name suggests, are creatures that mostly will attack you inside your home and other buildings. We'll start with the ones that exist outside your windows or in the areas immediately outside your home, being the nervous house guest and the peeping Tom. The latter seems to be mostly harmless other than just staring in your window, so closing the curtains would be the easiest move. One could also just open your window to lure it in and then slam the window on its elongated and vulnerable neck. You could then attack it efficiently as it would be immobile. The former mentioned is a massive creature peering over the roof side of a house. It is stated to stalk and can turn invisible to anyone that isn't its victim, causing intense emotional distress and paranoia for all that it is seen by. The only method I could possibly see for beating this thing would be to somehow overcome the paranoia it instills and act aggressive towards it. And by this, I do not mean attack it, because it would most definitely lash out and kill you, based on just how huge it is. What I mean is making insanely loud noises such as screaming, gunshots, firecrackers, or like a speaker with loud music volume. Anything that would scare it away, even if just temporarily. Next, we're going to be going over the two quadrupedal dog-like creatures, being White Linen and the Anxious Dogs. And curiously, they're both shaded white as well. Now, apparently anxious dogs can be nulled into becoming docile via treating them like real dogs, allowing them to let their guard down, so you can either escort it out of your house, or depending on the person, attacking it with a melee weapon or assumably fire weapon. Now, white linen is a more terrifying but easier creature to survive, as it has obviously exposed organs, so any timed blow with something sharp could probably do the job. Greeting Kamini, similar to Peeping Tom, has a very thin, vulnerable neck, so swinging a blunt object at its head would be the smartest idea. Now, the next two, known as the Fugitive and the Pursuer, are another one that I assume to be connected together due to their names obviously being associated with the same thing. And for these ones, I think all you would really need to do is just make sure you do not get in the way of the Pursuer finding the Fugitive. And make sure that if the Fugitive is inside your house, that you get it out as soon as possible, as the Pursuer would probably take that as you harboring him and kill you by association. Now, the next two I'm going to be looping together as well, as they are both humanoid creatures that silently navigate your house, being the Homebody and the Pinkman, aka the Abandoned Baby. Now, what we do know about these things is that they're able to efficiently sneak up on you, which in your house is horrific, and I can assume that the Homebody has similar goals to the Forgotten Baby, which is to break in and kidnap you. Trevor stated in his tier list that I will be discussing in full later that the Forgotten Baby is one of the most dangerous creatures alongside Cartoon Cat, ones that cannot be survived. The only method I could think of doing is keeping yourself from being snatched by finding places, preferably small ones, since these creatures are both huge, and then locking yourself inside or handcuffing yourself to something, so since they can't steal you, they'll become bored and leave. But this is going off the assumption that they don't want to kill you, and if they do, it would just be easy either way, so you might as well do that. I mean, because there's a 50-50 chance here. And with that class finished up, that would be the last of the canon Trevor Henderson entities. Now, regardless of me covering a lot of entities, this guy has a ton more art that I haven't gone over. So I have a few honorable mentions that I really liked the design of that I would like to state at the end of this video. This creature is known by Look All Ways Before Crossing, and it is a uniquely terrifying creature as it is said to just be basically a bunch of floating heads. In my opinion, its eyes would be, even though the most terrifying part, its biggest weakness, as they are so large. So using anything from a BB gun to a bow or a gun could render it completely blind and unable to track you. Next up, the marionette is cool for a number of reasons. Mostly the fact on how creepy it is that it's just hanging from nothing. Or at least I thought that until I discovered the creature known as the Puppeteer, which is another giant bird-like looking creature that, based off its name, would be controlling the marionette via strings. And I think that's an incredibly cool design, that it has a mini version of itself that it's manipulating in order to lure people in and then grab them. This one, although it is stated by Trevor to be harmless and just a little mischievous, I don't trust it at all, and I would just steer clear of Halloween decorations or things that look like Halloween decorations in any month other than October. Now, our final one is actually canon, but I wanted to bring these 5 into light because I didn't cover them for the fact that they are just stupid OP, especially the Upside Down Man, and the others just don't have a lot of information to go off of. Now, I know I mentioned the tier list a couple times for this video, and you're probably curious as to what that is, and the tier list is something that I, to be honest, saw at the very end of this script, and there was no way I was going back and doing all my stuff again, so I went off of the list that I mentioned in the beginning, but Trevor did make a tier list on how dangerous his creatures were, and he added a lot of creatures that did contradict that list, as it wasn't on there. Some that were on there, and some that he forgot. So since it was just really convoluted, I'm going to make the tier list a whole nother video. If you guys are interested in seeing it, let me know in the comments below, and I will make a part 2 of this video. I've always wondered what it would be like to live in the universe with all the Trevor Henderson entities, and I think it would go something like this. You awaken to the thing in the window looking at you again. It's here almost once a week, but that doesn't stop it from sending you onto the floor in a panic. A quick consultation of the danger level tier list doesn't make it any better, as it's ranked in the run category. But no worries, a quick 2-hour lockdown should suffice, just to be sure it's gone. It's safe to say you might be late for work, again. But you're optimistic because there's a category 5 giant roaming through town, and all you can do is hope that it takes out your office building on its way through. Either way, you should be fine staying home until the government gets this under control. If this sounds like something out of a nightmare, that wouldn't be too far off, as this is just a glimpse into what the average day would be like coexisting with the monsters of the Trevor Henderson universe, and it's nothing sort of a miserable existence. So just in case you're having a bad day in the real world, I'm going to go over how much worse it would be living in the twisted mind with Trevor Henderson's unique artwork. Now, a quick note, I want to go over that this whole video is heavily assumed based off of the images and lore provided on the wikis, so the majority is an educated guess and not canon. I am, however, going to be using the Trevor Henderson tier list that I mentioned at the end of my Logically Surviving video, so keep that all in mind. And I'd love to hear y'all's ideas on what you would think living in this universe would go, so feel free to tell me down in the comments. In my opinion, the only logical way to go about living in this universe would be to assume that some of the creatures are part of a species, meaning there are tons of them, some of them are more rare encounters, and some of them are just one being that are so OP that they have the ability to be anywhere at once, and you just happen to be one of the lucky few to encounter it. Regardless, this would not be new to you, and would likely have government warning systems installed by now, which is why I mentioned the natural disaster-like system for the giants earlier, with the higher category being a bigger and more devastating giant. And that's assuming that the smaller ones wouldn't just be dealt with by the military, and the bigger, more durable ones guided away as soon as possible, as it's likely they wouldn't be able to be killed. Now, to start a video, I'm going to be going over what I like to call the morning essentials. Now, as nice and calming as that sounds, it is way more positive than what it entails. In order to understand this, I need to first make you familiar with the home intruder class, which, if you haven't seen my previous Trevor Henderson video, is a grouping of entities with the interest and special talent of appearing where you feel the most safe and when you're the most vulnerable, aka inside of your home. The main things you want to look into is while you're sleeping and walking around in the dark. So I have a few do's and don'ts that can make it so you avoid waking up to missing family members and a 7-foot tall reaper waiting to claim what's left. First of all, don't ever turn off all the lights in your house or even your bedroom. Visibility is going to be key for determining a fight or flight scenario. Even if it's just a dim red or blue LED, it's better than pitch blackness. Not that I would even be able to move when it gets dark in this universe, not to mention close my eyes and sleep for 8 hours knowing these things could be eating my cats. And then meanwhile, hours later, the first thing I see when I wake up is the forgotten baby, who is known to move completely silently, with the people being unable to tell even what they're witnessing, because there's a giant disturbing creature that is somehow maneuvering into their bedroom with not so much as a decibel. This is in the too late category for a reason. To prevent this from happening in the first place, do fortify your house upon moving in. By this, I mean, as a bare minimum, invest in some sort of motion alarm systems, and while this sounds terrifying, being able to hear something that's coming down your hallway, at least you're not oblivious to it. Regardless, a security system is a must. Investing in a home with smaller raised windows, as well as finding a way to block your chimney and reinforce your door. Speaking of moving in, choosing a home wouldn't be that much of a blast either. Remember that amazing house 2 neighborhoods over that has a price too good to be true? Well, in this case, it's less because it has hidden damage or something, but rather is in a scissors neighborhood, which, if you're not familiar, essentially becomes infected by this entity that immediately begins to curse the location with increased vandalism and violence. And after weeks in an extremely hellish living scenario, your home has the chance of being chosen. And when it is, nothing can be done but succumb to this thing. Your only hope in this sort of thing would be paying attention and taking advantage of the helpful entities in this universe, such as Longhorse, who is known for warning about harmful things in the future while you're buying and moving into your new home. But that's just one of the many aspects of your new day-to-day life that would be turned upside down by these things. So let's go ahead and move on to our next section. Now, as you can probably assume, going out anywhere in this universe would be a struggle, as you're inevitably going to run into these things. Want to go to the mall? Well, you better hope you're not there too late. The movie theater? Well, I would suggest picking movies with a fuller theater. Even things as simple as staying after class seem to have become dangerous, as some of your teachers may have now been relocated and replaced with something that you might not want to be alone with. Not to mention running into a damn 9-foot tall mascot costume that you have never seen in your school before. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm not the most aware person, so I might not notice that there's a 6-foot school bell floating off the ground, and it probably shouldn't be getting closer. But it's assumed that if you do stay in populated locations, you will be less likely to be singled out should an attack happen. In this universe, there's no doubt that these things would be hunting us, but using the herd mentality that many animals use in the wild could save you from disaster. It is likely that due to the deaths these entities would cause daily, the local police forces would institute a curfew for your own safety, as they seem to be more aggressive at night, with some exceptions during the day, of course. So if you can avoid it, don't stay late unless you absolutely have to. The later you stay, the more people will go home, and the easier it is for something to enter your workplace, which, if you're fortunate enough, will contain some sort of guards, but who am I kidding? There's no way the owners will have the budget to institute guards for their employees. Also, this goes without saying, but if you see a person that doesn't look real or something's off about them, don't try to help them no matter how desperate they seem, as this could be an encounter with the stranger, who is known to have a disorienting mental effect that increases the chances of you getting lost. And trust me, it's not a good time for that. At least, not yet. So let's say you found a way to make it through work or school. Now you have to get home. But unfortunately, you accidentally stayed too late, and now it's past the heavily suggested curfew. And to make it worse, you live in a known hotspot for these things. When driving home, you have to not only be extremely aware of driving over bridges because of the threat of bridge worms grabbing your vehicle and pulling you under, which bridge worms, if you are unfamiliar, use fake faces to lure people in before revealing the disturbing underside. They are listed in the second most dangerous category on the tier list and are known for hiding under bridges and underpasses. And if you're thinking, well, I'll be fine because I don't go over bridges when I go home, well, you'll be lucky to know that they have a bigger relative known by the highway worm, who would make traversing any freeway at night, and maybe even during the day, a hellish and fatal mistake. And for those of you who can drive, I don't know if you've had to navigate anywhere without using freeways, but it's not a fun experience, especially at night, and definitely not something I would like to do after a long day of work. There are also plenty of threats that could jump out in the middle of the road and block your path, such as this mutated cow thing known by Big Charlie, or the threat of if you hit any sort of roadkill, then you'd basically be ending your own life right then and there, as it would summon the god of roadkill, who immediately responds to you killing an animal with your car by killing you with your own car, aka a fatal car crash. Back roads aren't any safer, as you would have to be aware of the country road creature, which has a long, lengthy humanoid design that wouldn't have a hard time at all outmaneuvering your car and stealing you straight out of it. So driving kind of sucks now, so what about walking home? Well, I feel like I shouldn't even have to explain this one, but I'm going to anyways. Despite walking home opening up more routes than just roads and bridges and highways, and so far I have yet to hear of something like a sidewalk worm, walking home is still probably one of the riskiest and last things you ever want to do in this universe, as there are just so many creatures that are seen walking around at night. But I'm going to let you be the judge. To start out, we have the Needle, which is a horse-like creature with, as the name entails, a needle-like face that can assumably run you right through and drink everything out of your body, similar to a mosquito. Now, in my How to Logically Survive video, I did explain how to outmaneuver these things. You could easily climb a tree, as they do bear a lot of similarities to horses, who also, as you probably know, can't climb trees. But as you can assume, that wouldn't be the safest option either. So if you plan on making it to your destination safe, I have a couple of tips for you. The first of which being, do stay on major pathways. Although streets do contain dangerous entities as mentioned before, they often mark well-lit routes, and trust me, you're going to want to see these things because there's a good chance they don't need the light to see you. Not to mention, as I will talk about later, as much as it will seem, the things that you could run into lost in the woods or, God forbid, some sort of abandoned building are way, way worse. So I don't recommend you lingering too long in one place. You need to keep moving, even if slowly and calculated. The longer you stay in one spot, the higher the chance of something unwanted catching up to you, or gaining the confidence to come out of its hiding spot. However, it's smart that you do use common sense, and when you choose to risk walking past or near something, you should be able to deduct that those are not Halloween decorations, it is December. So if you see something hanging, you should probably not be there much longer. And finally, don't bother taking public transport, as they will be there too. But if you do want a faster method that isn't a car, there is a compromise of using a bike. Now, when you do make it to about a mile of your home, it's important to look around your surroundings and make sure you aren't being followed. Because in this universe, this could be a consistent problem. Hell, there is even something called It Followed You Home. You need to keep in mind that as dark as it sounds, there are plenty of other people in this universe. There is no need to make yourself its target. And the only way to do that is by being aware. Okay, so you've now miraculously made it home from work or school. Now what? You'll be happy to know that if you were able to get out of your home, there's a good chance while you were gone, something was able to get into your home. Now, while it would be nice to have a smart home security system built in with like a Ring doorbell and something so you can see exactly what enters your house during the day, with as simple as a Alexa, how many entities came to the front door today? I'm gonna be real with y'all, I'm not gonna be able to afford shit like that. So I'd be stuck doing things the old-fashioned way, being walking around the house with your weapon of choice and checking every closet and hiding place for one of these nature's wonders that may have been waiting for me, especially something like the homebody or the nervous house guest, which the latter primarily stays outside on my roof, but again, I don't feel like getting snatched the second I walk into my backyard or when going out to check the mail or taking out the trash. Once you check your whole house, don't forget to lock up everything behind you and use anything you can to bar the door, and I would also suggest covering all the windows, because it is assumed that if you give them nothing to look at but blinds, entities like the peeping Tom will just move on to the next home. Oh, and one last thing, you're going to want to make sure that your pet is still your pet, as if you hear something like dog noises when you have a cat, there's no need for panic quite yet, as it could just be an anxious dog that figured its way into your house. Now, why these things are by default hostile creatures, you'll be okay as long as you follow my advice, although I wouldn't be as hopeful for your pet. But hey, I'm optimistic for their chances. All you have to do for anxious dogs is, despite their horrific and utterly disturbing nature, we can take some tips from the Mayfair Watcher Society that these originally derived from and treat them like a pet. Now hear me out. Apparently, similar to real pets, they mimic your body language, meaning if you treat them like a puppy, they'll act like one, and if you treat them like you're extremely disturbed and you're afraid of them, well then they'll give you something to really fear. Now on the bright side, I do have a theory that if you are able to tame them, they would make great guard dogs? Sure, we'll go with dogs. So you made it home, checked and locked your house, and even tamed a guard dog. So now you can hopefully get some rest. Until the giant walking through the city happens to wander through your neighborhood. Okay, screw this shit. I think we need a vacation from all of this. Somewhere nice, but where can we take a vacation? Maybe the forest? Well, I'm not so sure about that one. What about a nice Airbnb? That could be a good idea, until you remember going into random new houses isn't the smartest. Okay, it must be okay to relax on the beach, right? Alright, this is getting ridiculous. Since staying in one spot anywhere in this universe does not seem to be the best idea, perhaps something like hiking or backpacking through the calm countryside might be the best possible option. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say this is completely safe, but compared to the other options, this has the highest survival rate. But of course, we're going to need to take some precautions. But on the bright side, these giants do make life miserable for you and everyone around you, but at least from a distance, they're in a way cool to look at. It almost makes you forget how truly unfathomable a creature of that size would be. But I wouldn't stare too long, because then the others might take the time to figure out your route. In order to make your hiking experience better, do find some place to make camp for the night well before the sun sets. And whatever you do, don't make any form of fire or use any form of light. While this does make it so you can see everything in a nearby vicinity, just figured out exactly where you're going to be sleeping. I recommend just using a thermal sleeping bag and sleeping under a bush or inside of a hollowed out log. And of course, making sure no one saw you going into it. And no matter how tempting it is, don't take shelter in that abandoned building. Wait, I said don't. Don't go in an abandoned building. Well, now you're lost. I hope it was worth it. But I don't blame you too much, as there are many ways you could have ended up lost throughout this entire time, such as taking a desperate detour because something undesirable gets in your usual path, or simply because you're stuck face to face with something you can't quite fathom, but you feel like staying here even a single second more might not be the best option. Now, accidentally getting lost would be a key element of life in the Trevor Henderson universe, and I don't know if you guys have ever gotten lost by yourself at night, but that on its own is a traumatic experience, not to mention adding these creatures into the equation. The first thing to ensure survival is to figure out where you've ended up. These things don't necessarily have guaranteed locations, but there are areas that I can assume they exist around based on their names and pictures. For an example, the marionette and the horrifically named decoy for humans seems to hang around parks at night and assumably are more likely to be there. The biggest entity hotspots seem to be abandoned buildings though, as we see many images of these creatures using them to hide inside, likely during the day. So when lost, definitely don't go inside of buildings that you come across, as you might not like what's been living inside for a long time now. However, if you find yourself inside of an abandoned building, do stay as quiet as possible. You need to realize that this is their home, and they're going to be a lot better at traversing it in the dark than you are. Picture it as if you were some sort of bug and you fell into a spider's web. it's going to do anything to try to lure you into exposing your location. Some of these creatures use baits in the form of camouflage like Mr. Bags, or in rare cases, there is a creature known as the dove, otherwise known as the bird spider, that mimics a sort of bird lure, while a real spider in this metaphor hides just out of sight. Finding yourself inside of these infested buildings are a terrifying experience, but if you do somehow, you also have the added responsibility of making sure that you don't, for the love of God, let anything out, especially this one entity in particular, going by the man in the red room, that hangs from the ceiling and maneuvers around inside of a cruel red glow. It is supposedly able to manipulate people into its building through dreams to accidentally, or in some cases purposely, free it. So it's not uncommon that if you'd find yourself lost at night, you would also find yourself ending up inside of this building, adding another worry to your list. And I have no clue what this thing is capable of, so above all, don't let him out. But I wouldn't blame you if you did, because of the whole panicking thing. So all in all, you did your best. But hey, at least once it's free, you might have doomed humanity, but it likely has bigger plans than hunting you down. Regardless, your best bet when getting lost in this universe is staying put until some sort of natural light appears. And then when day breaks, you'll be able to hopefully naturally find your way back home. Assuming you haven't, of course, wandered your way into a forest. So far, living in this universe seems hellish and full of constant fear. And now, upon returning to your destroyed home, you remember why you left in the first place. But it's not all bad, because living in a universe like this would likely prevent lots and lots of new jobs that you could take up in order to pay for those damages. Mostly for a new type of researcher that specializes in entity investigation and home intrusion. This would likely be in the form of a new phone service that would need to be set up alongside 911 that deals with specifically home intrusions, assault, and kidnappings by these entities, which would likely be going rampant. If you've ever heard of the indie game Home Safety Hotline, you play as a pest control operator that answers calls on strange entities and pests alike, and you give advice on how to get rid of them. And I feel like something similar in this universe could improve the quality of living greatly. Is there a two-headed clown infesting your basement? Well, I suggest bolting that door shut and forgetting you have one. An odd text just summoned a mischievous bone creature and it's tormenting your family? Well, it's as simple as forwarding his text into a chain message and watching all your troubles fade away. A cartoon-looking cat has made its way into your bedroom? Well, no use continuing that call. Now, entity investigation in this universe would also provide a lot more insight on what these creatures are exactly and what they could possibly do. I recently read an extremely cool comment on my last Trevor Henderson video that was a fan talking about how the body of the pig is actually a lot more dangerous than most people think, as not only does its name entail that it could possibly be a demon, pigs are also omnivores, meaning if it catches you, not only would you die, it would eat you alive. It's information like this that could be put into an SCP-like database as a way of understanding these entities better, and therefore making everyone a little more optimistic about their quality of life. So you got a new job, had a halfway decent vacation that only almost killed you every once in a while, and your house is now slowly being repaired due to the money you're raking in from your new dangerous yet high-paying job. You finally can relax, sitting in front of a fireplace. This is your one form of peace that you felt since coming here. Except now, your anxious dog is nowhere to be seen, and the tiniest rustle of the carpet prompts you to look into the mirror to your side, just in time to see your last seconds flash before your eyes before the forgotten baby who you had forgotten about silently entered your house while you were relaxing and turned your lights out instantly. Yep, that is all it would take. One slip up and it's all over. Unfortunately, this is the norm here, as unlike our life where people can live to their 80s, 90s, and even 100s, in the Trevor Henderson universe, the life expectancy would be 30s and blessed to reach 40. One of the most depressing aspects is no matter how hard you try, this is not just one encounter you would survive. It's a whole life, and you can only get so many lucky breaks before one of these creatures catches up with you and takes you off guard. The terrifying aspects of Trevor's art is the fact that, if you think about it, 90% of them are drawn as the probable last photos that these people are ever going to take. Hypothetically, of course.
The aftermath of these creatures may be the worst fate that you could possibly encounter. Picture an entity that forces freak accidents on random victims, or a two-headed clown that lives deep underground. You may think, it wouldn't be that bad, or I'd just be strapped to the teeth and I'd make it, but I don't think anyone actually realizes just how bad it would be. In this video, I'm going to be going over the first week of living in the Trevor Henderson universe, starting with the first few minutes. Let me know down in the comments what's the last thing you'd want to see when first entering the Trevor Henderson universe. It's a Tuesday afternoon and you're finishing up a class when you start to notice a large amount of birds on the outside of the window, swarming and almost running away. Something is up, but for now you have to get home. Walking through the halls, you notice they are mostly barren. God knows where everyone went, but it's starting to really mess with your head. Come to think of it, the library that you were studying in was a little bit sparse today. Could everyone have gone home? Regardless, I think it's time you should join them. So you begin to walk out the front of the school, only to start hearing a school bell behind you. And that wouldn't be so weird, except it's way past the end of the day. And to make it worse, it just keeps repeating over and over again. It ends up being a lot more terrifying than you could have ever imagined it was. It takes a second to figure out what you're looking at, but it's unmistakably an incredibly large school bell peering over the top of one of the buildings, staring in your direction. In a confused panic, you run in a random direction away from the school, but this is one of the worst mistakes you could possibly make, as this is very far from the last nightmare that you're going to encounter. Okay, so before I move on with this guy's specific scenario, I want to go ahead and back up and go over what would be going on as a whole right now. Starting with the giants that people would begin to see off in the distance, noticeably causing a little bit of a panic. On top of this, gigantic storms and other natural disasters would likely be coming along with them, some of which I'll be going over in detail more later. Regardless of this, everyone would be trying to evacuate the cities and all the other areas where they are approaching all at once, causing massive traffic jams and a lot of chaos. Almost as if they were trying to evacuate like a tornado hitting the city. But in a weird way, that's basically what's going to happen. Some giants would even be appearing as if they were coming down from clouds. In some cities, fires would be breaking out, filled with the wildfire giants, and in the worst cases, it would appear like the cities would be entirely wiped off the map. But the sight of them alone would cause more panic than most people realize, as many people would be just struggling to comprehend what the hell was going on. And the worst part is the crowding of all the highways that would be caused by the panic would make everyone stuck on the roads, and it would become extremely easy for a certain gigantic worm. So now that we've gone over that, I want to return back to our example, who is unfortunate enough to still be blissfully unaware on what is happening. On the walk home, though, everything would start to become unmistakably weird, and there's no way you could not figure out that something crazy was going on around you. For example, you would begin to see stuff like giant piles of trash bags just sitting on the street or areas around you where they really shouldn't be. And then no matter how far you walked, they would just keep appearing in front of you or around you, almost as if you're seeing the exact same pile again and again. But as most people know, trash doesn't move on its own, so this would be impossible. Except for the fact that this is not trash. Rather, the disturbing creature, Mr. Bags, who is designed to look similar to common trash, only to devour people who get too close. The sight of this, understandably, would send you into a panic, but lucky enough, you were only like a minute from your house. But trust me, it's about to get a whole lot worse. By the time the first few hours have hit, people have likely begun to die en masse. The giants have begun their damage, killing thousands. Entities like Cartoon Cat have likely at least claimed a few dozen by now, and with the highway and bridge worms basically having a field day, it's safe to say things are getting really bad. On the flip side, however, the government is likely trying to get this under control, but honestly, how can they? These incidents would start being broken up into two categories. One being the very big, obvious ones that would be requiring a majority of the firepower and with that collateral damage. And then the ones that are a lot more small and isolated, hiding themselves in areas and then ambushing people. But that's assuming that all of these things are, again, their own species instead of just each being one entity in one location, so it'd be a lot more widespread. Unless it's something like Cartoon Cat that can essentially be everywhere at once anyways, so it doesn't really need to be more than one. But it's not just city areas. Rural areas would also be hit almost as hard, with trucks being picked off by country road creatures and livestock being threatened by the Red Witch, who Trevor himself gave the caption stating, "It's in the field again, go check on the cattle," leading me to believe that it's a reoccurring blight in these rural areas. Police would understandably be overwhelmed with all the calls they're getting of people being attacked by various different entities, and most of them would just give it up and go home to protect their own families. with the military having a very similar predicament, but instead being preoccupied with, the giant problem, too much to be able to help anyone else with any of the other predicaments going on. Regardless of this, I'm willing to bet a sort of EAS alert would be announced to the public, telling people to shelter in place inside of their homes. If only that would make them safe. In a panic, you would probably just get home and begin barring the windows and doors, not realizing that something could already be inside. Before you cover the last window, you notice that, hey, at least some of the wildlife seems to be surviving, as you're able to catch a glimpse of a deer outside one of the windows. Oh god, maybe it's better we don't look outside. But watching the TV isn't much hope either. Do not go outside for any reason. It would be better to starve to death than to let one of them catch you. Huh, go figure. But right as that last word hits, you hear something rummaging around in your cabinets. A large hand jolts across the floor and then back into the darkness, confirming your worst fears that something has already made it inside. Well, it seems like our friend here has got this all figured out, so we'll check back on him later. While this situation might seem like a horrible example, it's just one of many that would be going on all at once. People will be discovering things in their basement, in the alley next to their house, but let's take a second to figure out one of the worst locations that you could have been when this all started. Now, at first glance, the woods seems like it would be one of the best locations that you could go during all of this. However, it wouldn't take long to realize that this is a giant mistake due to just the sheer amount of entities that would be roaming around here. I want to start with the most obvious of which being the threat of Siren Head, who I'm sure everyone knows about at least a little bit. But Siren Head, for those who don't know, primarily is going to wait in the forest making alarms to lure people in. The worst part is, in a situation like this, alarms would be going off a lot regardless to warn people about the outbreak of these entities, meaning most people wouldn't think twice when hearing a warning siren in the woods. And by the time they did, most would already be dead. Now, I don't think people realize how, devastating it would be if these things existed in the woods and were just these apex predators of humans. Because think about it this way, Siren Head is incredibly fast to the point of being able to catch up with a speeding car. Not to mention he could probably kill you almost instantly if he caught you. And I can also assume he can detect you from extremely far away. Think about it this way. Being in the woods with Siren Head is kind of like being in the Arctic around a polar bear, who, for reference, is still only like a third of Siren Head's size, but still has a 90% chance of killing you, even if you're like a mile away. So imagine what your chances would be against Siren Head, not to mention the other entities like the precursor of the First War, whose name alone already interests me, but not enough to be within 100 miles of this thing. Regardless, it appears to be a forest giant, and therefore another thorn in your side. Well, a thorn in the sense that, rather than being a mild annoyance, it destroys your entire bloodline, if that paints a better picture. The forest already contains enough cryptids and mysteries without being in this universe, so you can imagine all of them being a complete red zone. But in the first few hours, people are still kind of mentally lost and disconnected from reality when you're all the way out here. So you would be forgiven for not noticing what's going on, especially if you were camping in the middle of the boons. But post noticing a creepy stalking creature or two, you should begin to realize that something is a tad fishy, and that would be likely the hag coming out of the nearby lake and devouring a few children. Okay, it's been a few days now, so let's check back in with our homebody situation. Let's say you're a bit lucky and loaded a couple bear rounds into that home invader, as every red-blooded American should, and meandered your way into the attic. Here you have a sort of window that you can now see outside again, so let's see what's going on out there. And the curtain goes down. Within a few days, the government would likely begin to put together a sort of survival list. Hell, if I can do it, they can. But anyone who's seen any sort of analog horrors like this would know that they're never really that good, and people would still continue to die en masse. So with nothing really to do but sit here, you would just lay your head down for a brief rest, only to have the most peculiar dream. You don't know why, but something is ushering you to choose one of these 5 disturbing candidates. Option number 1 appears to be hiding behind a trash can, making muttering noises. You don't know why, but you think it has something to do with Burger King. Option number 2 appears at the end of a long hallway, nearly 7 feet tall. Following them up, number 3 seems to enjoy a woodland getaway, if you could call it that. Option 4 is, option. Finally, option 5, apparently he wants your jawbone. Before you can figure out the implications of all that,
You wake up to the noise of another humanoid outside your window, this time having a sort of surreal, inhuman movement, almost as if they're being manipulated by some sort of string. And it's almost as if it's offering a hug of sorts. Yeah, hard pass. But it seems like your problems may be a lot bigger than you expected. Hopping back over to the woods, I'd like to give an estimation of around 80% of campers or survivalists have been cut down already, but there's always people who are insanely crafty that stay alive somehow. So your best bet would honestly be digging something underground, then putting a large amount of brush over top of yourself and hoping something large doesn't just cave your head in. You could also technically leave, but as I mentioned earlier, cars make you a giant target from more things than one, especially the entity labeled Slid Down the Clouds, that contains many almost crab-like arms and squid-like tentacles. Based on the name, I can only really imagine what this creature does. But my best guess is if you try to go anywhere near it, you may get a one-way vacation into the atmosphere. Sometime very soon, a majority of people will begin running out of basic amenities, and dehydration will begin to set in. So at this point, how many people have exactly been wiped out? Well, to start, by reasons simply like panic, car accidents, dehydration, fires, etc., you'd be looking at the non-entity death toll around 200,000 to 400,000 in the US alone. But once you add Trevor Henderson entity kills into this equation, it would nearly triple. And we'd be looking at almost 1 million deaths, which with millions more worldwide. With the nights being far worse than the days, as majority of the entities are more active at night. Not to mention the night-specific ones, with hundreds of that isn't a moon and like creatures roaming the streets and devouring everyone in sight. The roving moon being another similar nighttime entity with almost a light like bulb as a face, towering over houses and running on all fours. It's safe to say that if you see a light, run for your life. When it comes to the giants, we can only hope that at least a few have been neutralized by now, but at the same time, smaller cities with less military focus have likely been turned to rubble. Not to mention, I'm sure at least someone in the government has been recommending carpet bombing what they call lost cause cities, so that's going to be even more deaths. It's safe to say humanity probably isn't winning this, as it's basically like the Mist movie times 100. And being almost a week in, we're going to have to start dealing with an entirely different set of problems. Mainly that all of our cars are going to be out of gas, you're going to be out of water, out of food, and things like dehydration are going to seriously start to set in. The people who are still alive by now likely have had some sort of disaster prep going on. But even most of them are going to start to realize that they're going to need to start looking for food. Lucky for them, though, many grocery stores are likely not going to be insanely empty, as most people that were going for them early on would just be massacred. The only problem is that even if you do make it to the store, you're throwing the dice on whether you're going to run into the stranger, which is an albeit odd-looking creature, roaming shops and essentially destroying your mind once you're inside, making exits seeming distant and impossible to find, causing dizziness and hallucinations, all while he will randomly show up around the store. Now, it is going to be unknown whether this creature will actually kill you personally, or whether it'll just confuse you so much that you die of dehydration while wandering around the store for days. But regardless, if you are just like kind of wandering around the store, I wouldn't be surprised if something crazy takes advantage of the fact that you're delirious and takes the liberty of putting you down. If you do get lucky, however, and find a store without something undesirable inside, you would be forgiven for just barricading all the doors down and deciding to just live in there, since it does have the most resources and the easiest ability to stay alive. But what about those left to live in the forest? After weeks, it's fair to suggest that you would have to find some wild game if you expect to be alive this long. To make things even worse, in the wilderness you would need almost double the normal amount of calories due to weather and the extra effort for, say, shelter building and sprinting for your life. And honestly, I'd be surprised if you went like 10 minutes without hands trying to grip you from behind trees or a flying head rushing you. Even things like birds could be a horrible idea to stick around due to things like the dove, who, as horrific as it sounds, possesses a sort of dove or pigeon looking like face that is used to lure hungry hunters in, thinking it's just a quick meal, only to actually be a much larger creature hiding behind it in the dark, kind of like an anglerfish. And the dove would be killing many survivors like this. Not to mention, the deer I mentioned earlier is actually one of 4 found footage creatures, with another being called
being labeled the passerby at night, which is a very large creature that is assumed to be very fast, possessing about 6 legs. I would assume these also could pose major threats both in the woods or if you tried to escape. Even Trevor stated that after wandering over the road in the picture, it disappears into the woods. But after a few weeks, this wouldn't be your biggest issue. As I don't know if any of y'all remember, but at the beginning of this video, I mentioned a large amount of natural disasters signaling the appearance of the giants. Well, out of the disasters, one type of giants, being the wildfire giants, tend to show up on wildfire cameras in the presence of these huge fires. And with no one to put them out, and the government being mostly focused on bigger threats like the wandering death or other destruction giants, these fires could easily envelop the entire woods around you, forcing you to flee into the nearby countryside, getting rid of any cover that the forest might have provided for you. In the distance, you would see what looks like almost 10 different heads smashed together, and more eyes than you can count. But despite this giant size, this time, all of them are on you. I think it's clear by now the forest might not have been the best way to survive this whole thing, but was it really a good option? I mean, I couldn't imagine, like, for an example, hiding in like an abandoned location or something. There really isn't anywhere where you'd be completely safe. And by this point, I would just imagine most people are going to die. But regardless of this, it isn't really something that's just going to go away after a certain period of time. We're going to need to find a way to integrate this into a sort of new norm. So how exactly would this look for humanity coexisting with these creatures so we don't go extinct? Now, coming in contact with these Trevor Henderson entities would honestly decimate everyone involved, from cities, rural areas, forests, and especially suburbs. Within weeks, at least 20 to 40% of humanity would be completely wiped out. And those who remained would have to be carefully calculating each and every decision, as one wrong move could be their last. So how do we even continue living at this point? Well, starting with the giants, they would have to be timed and watched ahead of time via some sort of radar system to evacuate the areas completely ahead of their arrival. Damage to cities would be inevitable, but as is the same with, like, say, hurricanes or earthquakes, the key would be keeping the death to a minimum so that rebuilding could be made easy. Even Trevor himself stated this when referring to the Birdwatcher. It's amazing what people can and will adapt to if given enough time. They had the evacuations down to science by now, and even with an emergence, the fields kept them from doing any major damage, and they didn't even have to stop the trains this time. He wouldn't be late after all. This shows that even canonically, Trevor himself admitted that the giants could be dealt with and predicted to avoid any major catastrophes every single time they decided to show up. Well, except for like the behemoth, but there should only be one of him. But to be honest, the giants would be the easy parts. The most difficult things would be how overwhelmed and swamped the police would be having to deal with all the attacks from the smaller entities. And in my opinion, the only way this would even make sense is for a more in-depth survival guide to be handed out to every single person so they could deal with things without having to involve law enforcement every single time. For example, if any of you guys remember my survival video, the anxious dogs respond to how you act, so if you act like they're your pets and not horrific abominations of God, they will often reciprocate that and not be a threat. This will often include barricade techniques and engineers that specify in securing your home against these things, and panic rooms in case something really bad went wrong, which it very well still might, especially with literal deities like the god of roadkill and Cartoon Cat running around, who both essentially cannot be stopped no matter what. Bridges would also likely have to be inspected or rebuilt, so bridge worms would be unable to use them as ambush spots, kind of like how in some cities, how pigeon spikes are set up so birds can't perch there. Police would likely have to set up a sort of Mandela catalog situation where they would have to be identifying exactly what is attacking someone to know the difference between something that can be helped or from people who will be long dead by the time they get there, which is kind of unfortunate for the caller, but it's what has to be done. But the alternative is losing the entire police force to like Cartoon Cat or something. Areas like forests and abandoned buildings would be considered dead zones, so if anyone is stupid enough to go there, they would not be able to be helped. I honestly think driving would become far too dangerous as well. It would have to be somehow modified or replaced with something else, like trains, because if you hit any sort of animal or living thing in general, it would end in your death due to the god of roadkill, and the man with the upside down face would purposely be causing freak accidents, and I could imagine every time you get behind the wheel, there would be a serious chance tons of people would be dying. Not to mention the damage leaving your car on the road somewhere would likely have. But on the bright side, we also have the benefits of the friendly creatures such as Longhorse to occasionally warn us of danger, not to mention how cool some of these creatures would be to look at. I feel like over time people would adapt and start to not die as much, and at bare minimum be able to get food and water consistently again. But this would take years, and during these first couple years, civilization as we know it would take a gigantic hit. And honestly, this is just being optimistic, as it's very possible we would just be completely wiped out and none of this would end up happening. But me personally, I would hope for the other route.
One of the videos on YouTube I've always personally loved was Jaden Salad's series Finding the Location of Liminal Spaces, but recently it had me thinking. In the past I've done many videos about encountering Trevor Henderson entities in real life without really mentioning where would be hot zones and where would be safe. So today I'm going to be going through various methods to figure out where each Trevor Henderson entity exists and then placing it on this map. This is finding the location of every Trevor Henderson entity. Well, most of them. Bridge worms are iconic entities known for lurking under bridges and wearing fake faces, only to then reveal their real one beneath when their victim gets close enough. This we know. But what no one has really bothered to wonder is what bridges specifically are bridge worms found under. Well, before we find out, let's back up a bit. So for those unaware, Trevor Henderson, his method of art that he begun the trend of is basically to take images that are already creepy and then draw entities in them that match the background perfectly so they appear as if they are real life instead of, just an image he drew. This also gives the sort of vibe that it's a sighting, like a picture someone took with their phone or a video someone took with their phone of an actual encounter, which in my opinion is what makes his images so scary to begin with. But we can use this to our advantage. While some of his images are indeed drawn backgrounds, there are many that are actual locations in the real world. But finding those actual locations would be kind of the hard part. First, let's try the easy route though, checking the entire wiki for links or sources. For Bridgeworm's case, the only thing that wasn't a Twitter link was this Russian phrase that, to my dismay, just translated to made by Trevor Henderson rather than a location. Plan B, on the other hand, would be doing my best to edit the worm itself out of the image in Photoshop so I can reverse search it. Doing so would reveal that it looks near identical to abandoned tunnels in San Pedro Laguna in the Philippines. And while the tunnel is not identical, it's obvious it's the same arc structure, even down to the signs on the left and right. This leads me to believe that bridge worms definitely do exist throughout the Philippines. Well, at least it's on an island, right? But being honest, I wanted to focus this video primarily on entities in the US, so this answer didn't really satisfy me. I kept looking, and apparently there are people who believe that bridge worms could also exist in New Jersey, in a spot labeled the Hole in the Wall. So for the case of our map, the bridge worm will be on the East Coast in New Jersey, but which location do you think is more accurate? The Smile Room, as I've mentioned in a few videos in the past, is said to be a gateway to another dimension where a starving giant has become trapped, leaving only its mouth that can travel through narrow spaces in the building, as well as create smaller humanoid versions to run people down. Now for this one, it's a bit easier because of, the whole giant text over the door, and how many places do you know that say the Smile Room over it? So after tracking down the original image, I realized it was one that was popularly used all over in a lot of disturbing and eerie images subreddits. The location seems to be abandoned and of course be labeled the same thing. With some quick research, this was revealed to be a bit of a conflicting narrative, revealing they could possibly exist in two places. The first of which would be what Trevor himself claims is the location of the Smile Room, revealing this as he claims it's actually in an amusement park in Oshawa, Ontario, up in Canada. But the actual facility that people have discovered shows that contrary to this statement, the Smile Room exists inside the abandoned Virginia State Mental Hospital in Petersburg, Virginia. So since our map is focusing on the US, I'll go ahead and place it there. Damn, that's two already in the same general area. Or my East Coast fans are definitely having a bad day right now. But before I move on, can we quickly talk about how horrifying it is that this whole room thing is in a mental hospital? Like, could you imagine being a patient that's genuinely struggling mentally, being dragged down the hall into a room that says Smile Room all over it? Oh, hell no. Like, that's some genuine nightmare fuel right there. there. On top of being the most iconic of Trevor's entities, Siren Head seems to have the biggest range of habitats throughout the US, and when I was searching Google Maps, this is an image taken of a cemetery near Glass Beach, Hawaii. I realized that there are quite a few cemeteries in this area, but when you take a look at the trees in the background, you'll undoubtedly notice that they are the exact same trees in the original image. In fact, if you zoom in, you can even see the same shaped tombstones, confirming that this image is taken here or really nearby. And again, we have another entity, especially one like Siren Head, that has somehow figured its way onto a tropical island. But unlike the other entities that I've mentioned, this is nowhere near the only state that he's been spotted in. And again, we have a sort of conflicting narrative where Trevor claims they are taken in certain areas while the actual images say something different. But for the sake of this video and it being canon, Trevor himself states that Siren Head has been spotted in the following: in Arizona, Arkansas, Yellowstone National Park, which is split between Idaho and Wyoming, which is awesome because that's my state, and finally a town in Indiana. But on top of the ones he mentioned, I wanted to try to confirm at least one other one on my own. But I quickly figured out that this would be easier said than done, as there are likely a million places where windmills can be, or dark fields, or just general buildings that you see Siren Head in front of, making it nearly impossible to figure out a majority of these images. And every time I would reverse search one of them, I would just end up slamming my head into a wall and realizing that I just got a bunch of random images of dark fields, and there's not really any way for me to prove to you guys that, oh, this is the exact dark field that you can barely see that Siren Head was in the image. But I was able to sort of form my best guess, as when I was putting these images together, a lot of the times the images that I saw that would correlate in the reverse searches all sort of accumulated into a couple states, being Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, or some of the other southern Great Plains states, which makes a lot of sense, so we can likely assume he is in most of them. That's not even mentioning the 30 plus other images of Siren Head on the wiki in various spots, making Siren Head likely the most widespread entity I've gone over thus far. Now, in the cartoon cat and dog lore, they theoretically can be anywhere worldwide, due to just how godlike their powers can be. But where exactly are they in their respective images? To start, we have the near impossible task of figuring out where the original image was taken. The only hint we get is that with some sort of mall, being labeled the Dirt Mall, and that it is likely abandoned because of Cartoon Cat's nature to inhabit abandoned locations. Now, this one in particular took me forever, I'm not gonna lie. I tried editing them out, I tried taking the crop to left or right, top or bottom part of the image and putting that into reverse search in Google, with none of it yielding any good results. I was about to give up when I realized something different about the image. Those side pillars. They're probably the most weird looking ones I've ever seen in a mall. Usually they're a lot different, and that became my key. I cropped specifically those pillars, and after a lot of scrolling, I would find this video of a guy exploring an abandoned mall in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Who would have guessed that shit? But there it was, those same weird pillars. Honestly, I think we have found our spot. The original setting of Cartoon Cat would be in none other than the Northridge Mall, left abandoned for the last few years. Believe it or not, despite Cartoon Cat being incredibly difficult to find, Cartoon Dog would be even more impossible, as all we really see is him peeking through the door in a random abandoned house with some debris all over the place. But that isn't going to stop me from at least attempting to find it. Using the same strategy as before, I tried cropping out different parts of the image that seemed like they were unique and trying to find where this creature could possibly be. And when this yielded no definite results, I tried blacking out the entire doorway, seeing if that would be better. But still, I just got a ton of images of abandoned houses that in no way I could confirm was the same one. One of the closest leads, however, that I had to go searching through the r/Trevor Henderson Reddit for a really long time would claim to be some sort of German hospital. But I don't know if I 100% believe that, as looking at the images of the place, it looks nothing like the original image, but I could be completely wrong. What do you guys think? Based on how difficult a lot of the other images have been thus far, I honestly expected this one to be the same, since it could be any chair in any place in any part of the US. But to my surprise, a quick crop and throw into Google Lens would immediately give me multiple results, all leading to the same place. The one that the entity, the man in the red room, who, for those unaware, is hell-bent on escaping this building for one reason or another, likely something world-ending, is actually based in Savannah, Georgia, in an old abandoned abandoned, supposedly haunted location called the Sorrel Weed House. Multiple different images show a very similar lone chair against the same brick wall, identical to the one with the sighting of the man in it, adding another entity to the East Coast list. Going into our first section talking about the giants, I figured finding some of these entities was either going to be extremely easy or complete because, it was a bigger scene with more landmark, or it was going to be a complete nightmare for the same reason that Siren Head was, being that there are a million different landscapes with like rolling hills, trees, and fields across the entire world, and it's impossible to tell where each one could be. But regardless, I felt like I had to go over as many giants in this video as I possibly could. Despite all this confidence, I would immediately run face first into another brick wall, as even after editing the entire creature out, like I said, there could be a million places like this. It was likely stock footage taken either somewhere in Europe or in upstate New York, or the other New England states. Since it is so large, we can likely assume it lives in all of the above, so I'll be placing it accordingly. Following that, we have the Birdwatcher, in which, at this point I'm noticing that these are just all nightmares to find. The amount of rail yards we have in the US, and in every other country for that matter, is insane. But the closest thing I've been able to find that would honestly make sense is the Sunnyside Rail Yard in Queens, New York, adding another giant to the state's list. But I wouldn't give you guys shit if you claimed that this was stretching it a little bit and didn't agree with my theory. Finally, for this section, I managed to actually have some luck finding the entity with the Behemoth, as I am very familiar with the unique texture of the mountain in the image, being that of the dormant and very not dormant volcanoes on the Hawaiian Islands. And after some searching, I found it was indeed from a picture of the Mauna Kea, one of the largest mountains in the world, which makes a lot of sense since the Behemoth is for sure one of the biggest, if not the biggest giants that Trevor has made. Not to mention the texture of the mountain is undeniably similar to what I was talking about earlier. Shockingly, this does mean that there is a second entity in Hawaii. Damn, being honest, that's probably the last place I could have guessed all these Trevor entities would group up. Now, to sort of offset the last section where we put a lot of work in, but didn't really find a lot of for sure concrete results, I'm going to go ahead and go into a much easier section for me, being the man with the upside down face. An entity that is polar opposite to someone like, say, Longhorse, as rather than warning of a dangerous and deadly situation, he causes them, all while completely unnoticed until people look closely at the pictures. It has also been theorized that children can see him too, but like Cartoon Cat, he could theoretically be anywhere in the entire world. But again, where is he in these images? To start, the first of which, he is obviously going to be in front of Millbury Bank in Massachusetts. This one is obvious due to the huge sign above the door, but that's not the only time he was spotted in the state. The car accident photos between a 1940 Mercury and a 1939 Plymouth was also in Massachusetts, as I was able to find the image in the archives of the Boston Public Library in the Leslie Jones collection. Following this, he was also spotted in Santa Anita in California, in the image following the train incident where 5 people were killed when the train struck their car. Sort of noticing a pattern, I looked further into the entire Leslie Jones collection that a lot of these images thus far have been a part of. I found that the sailor image was taken in Illinois, followed by this one that was taken in the Oswego River flooding in Kansas, and finally this one was in the Kmart coal mine in Fayette County, West Virginia. This marks the upside down man in many states across the US and possibly even more widespread than Siren Head. Contrary to the whole giant section that I mentioned earlier, the wildfire giants actually seem to be their whole own category, with 8 distinct entities showing up throughout their different pictures. It seems that they could be named that because they are associated with sorts of natural disasters, but that's not really confirmed. But they do show up during things like wildfires, earthquakes, and other weather-related events that you could think of. But whether they cause these events or, just show up during them is honestly debated. The name could, now that I think about it, also be from the fact that they show up on wildfire cameras in every image that they're present in. But I'll leave it up to you guys. Regardless, will this make them easier to track? Well, to start, they have the first and second wildfire giants with the markings NV, Nevada, and Cal Fire, California. The meatball entity is tricky because while it does say Nevada, it also says Big Bear Resort, which is in California, which leads me to believe it's likely near the border in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. The next one, labeled the Signal Bugs, states Kingsville. I was so close. It's not happening. She's not coming in here. Not happening. I'm not negotiating with terrorists. The next one, labeled the Signal Bug, says Kingsville, El Dorado, NV Seismolab, which again on the map is near the Nevada border in California, eerily close to where I grew up actually, which is a new level of horrific to me because I've been to El Dorado multiple times. It appears the Nevada lab must have launched some sort of investigation further into California following some of these sightings, as the next one says Gonzales, which is much closer to the coast rather than the Nevada border, where the rest of the iconic giants were found. The fog riser is unique because there's no place called Bullion in Nevada or California, but it is possible they could mean Mount Bullion, which is in California. And I'm 90% sure of this because there is some sort of second image of the creature on hand, of the creature's hand peeking out behind something, marked Cummings Mountain, which is nearby Mount Bullion, which to me sort of confirms it. The giant moth seems to be located in Box Springs, which is again a California community that would eventually be absorbed into Riverside. I'm beginning to see some sort of pattern here that all of these entities are either in Nevada or in California, which makes sense because California is often labeled a wildfire state, but I definitely say Nevada should be part of this list as well. I want to dip into an entity I don't believe I've talked about on the channel thus far. Known as the Singing Clergyman by most of the community, the encounter is stated to have gone like this. A strange handmade automaton found in a hidden back room of the Church of the Benevolent Sound in Claremont, Ohio, discovered by two teenage urbex explorers in 1986. Both of them claimed to have heard it sing in their presence, while both claimed that the sound was like nothing else I've ever heard. Both would then suffer from extreme insomnia, difficulty concentrating, and a desperate need to go back to the clergyman and hear it sing again. As of this writing, the location of the machine is unknown. If that didn't confirm it enough, this entity is based in Ohio, and whether it can wander outside is unconfirmed, but it definitely appears to brainwash people into returning back to it, giving it a horrific potential. Regardless, this entity is the first we have for Ohio. To finish up this video, I think we need to mention Trevor's podcast, the Mayfair Watcher Society, where he specifically mentions multiple entities like anxious dogs, scissors, and a few others. And at first, entities like this were thought to be near impossible to locate due to the lack of landmarks in the images, but them being featured in the podcast changes this. Mayfair, or the fictional town that they all exist in, with some research and analyzing the episodes, most certainly takes place in the Rust Belt of the US. And for those unfamiliar, these include many states, but for the sake of this video, these entities are likely present in Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Anxious dogs are likely widespread, but scissors usually go neighborhood to neighborhood, slowly wiping everyone out like a virus. And there used to be more entities mentioned in this podcast, but they seem to have been wiped from the wiki, leading me to believe that they might not have been canon. We have now finished this video's map of entities, of where it can, for the most part, confirm where Trevor's entities live. Let me know if
Absolute titan of containing and designating disturbing entities, from 173 to 096. The list goes on forever. Now at this point in my channel, I've done a lot of research into both SCP and Trevor Henderson, and I've been extremely curious how, if Trevor Henderson entities were classified as SCPs, how would they be designated and how would the SCP Foundation contain each entity, or worse, fail to? Hi, I'm Mr.Mirage. I make videos covering internet indie and analog horror in ways that keep you up at night. So if you expect to sleep tonight, I don't think you should watch any more of my content, just a fair warning. SCP-01T. SCP-01T is classified by its victims as Cartoon Cat, and is a Keter level anomaly, meaning containing this thing is almost impossible, and at best, extremely difficult. SCP-01T possesses unfathomable power, anywhere from morphing itself into many different forms to being in almost any area that it wishes. Any sightings of this creature are to be immediately reported to the Foundation. It has been largely theorized that this creature is related to another similar entity that will be designating SCP-01T-1. Little is known about this form, and it has even been theorized that these two entities are one of the same. However, this isn't confirmed. Either way, it is assumed they can be treated the same. Special containment measures. It is assumed it cannot be contained physically, so theorized methods include the Quiet Labyrinth method. This consists of two phases. The first phase is all media, including photos, videos, drawings, anything, is to be eliminated from the public view. If a breach does happen, another weaker entity is to be mass covered in all popular outlets to drown out the Cartoon Cat image. It is theorized that as long as no one watches it, its ability to manifest itself outside of the facility becomes weaker. This should be followed up by phase 2, in which O1T is to be lured into its own underground facility consisting of a large randomized maze. This should keep the entity busy as it moves through the halls. On top of this, no less than 3 D-class personnel are to be funneled into the same maze to keep it occupied. The outside of this facility must remain fully staffed as to make sure there isn't any signs of it disappearing. As long as it has prey, it has no reason to try to escape. In the event of a breach, all staff's family is to be compensated with adequate funding to help make up for the death of their loved ones. Class Archon. SCP-02T is described as the skull of a horse attached to an immense number of extended vertebrae. A few strands of black hair are sparsely attached to its form. Its vertebrae, similar to a human finger, can be generated or removed at will. The maximum rate of generation or deletion is unknown. Cracking bones can often be heard right before the sighting of O2T. And while the entity itself is harmless to humans, it almost always signifies some sort of bad omen. Sightings are almost always followed by some sort of major accident where the person is killed, sometimes even signifying that you're about to be attacked by another SCP. Special containment procedures. This creature is not to be contained under any circumstance. It has been unanimously decided by the Council that O2T, while disturbing, is beneficial to humanity, and if contained would lead to many more deaths due to unforeseen circumstances. Extensive campaigns have been used in order to attempt to inform the general public that rather than a tangible threat, this creature is actually a positive warning. However, this has been mostly met with failure since this creature is extremely disturbing and most people fear it more than appreciating its foreshadowing. If any personnel manages to come in contact with this being, a tracking device is to be attempted to be placed on its body to see if the location can be better used to help humanity. Class Apollyon. SCP-03T is a Titanic-sized entity grouped to be the largest of many giants, many of which all share the Apollyon classification, measuring up to a few hundreds of kilometers in both height and length. SCP-03T is assumed to be somewhat reptilian, with its skin being basically indestructible and thus far unable to sustain damage from any attempts to neutralize it. O3T has caused immense amount of damage to both civilization and wildlife, decimating anything it walks through in a somewhat random pattern. Originally, it was said to live inside a mountain before it violently escaped breaking out, creating devastating earthquakes in its wake. O3T is likely indestructible, and extreme caution should be used as not to aggravate or approach it, as we do not know how much damage it is truly capable of. Special containment procedures. Containment should not be attempted. It is not only impossible short or long term, it will likely turn it violent, leading to end of the world scenarios and thousands of lives lost. It is theorized that you can use leading procedures to ensure O3T does not approach major population centers with certain light patterns from aerial units, and these are to be tested as soon as possible in order to find the most effective method of getting its attention. Class Euclid. SCP-04T is described as a creature resembling an eel with its humanoid facial features. The eyes seem to be human-like, however, the pupils are black, making the eyes not relate to a normal eel. The nose seems to relate to an actual human nose with 2 normal nostrils. The mouth doesn't look alike to humans, and in fact, it doesn't have teeth. O4T emits an extremely acidic black ooze that melts most materials. Despite it resembling an ocean eel, it seems to like fresh water. O4T exhibits some sapience and will willingly attack anyone that comes too close, either physically or with its acidic saliva. Special containment procedures. O4T is to be kept in a standard freshwater tank. However, it is important glass is not to be used, rather instead bordering it with a dual-layer plastic compound, one being made of PTFE and the other being comprised of polypropylene and Monel. This ensures that no matter what kind of acid it's using, one of the layers will stop it from penetrating into the outer layer, letting O4T escape, even if its saliva is similar to hydrofluoric acid, which is notoriously hard to contain. When feeding or interacting with O4T, one must always wear a multiple layer chemical resistant suit or coveralls in case of contact with the acid, but is usually recommended to feed indirectly or when O4T is inactive. Class Euclid. O5T is unfortunately very infamous in the public eye, and therefore it is impossible to hide its existence. O5T is at its base a 12-meter tall humanoid and described as having a heavily emaciated, near skeletal frame covered in mummified flesh with a color similar to rusted metal. It is capable of emitting various noises using its sirens. Some notable noises have been documented creating including radio broadcasts, white noise, and human voices. The fact that it can transmit radio broadcasts is fascinating, as this requires the ability to pick up radio waves, decode them, and relay them in real time. O5T is deceptive and often blends into its surroundings. It is unknown how many examples of O5T exist, but as of now, the Foundation has confirmed there is at minimum 3 that will need to be designated for the purpose of differentiating the types of O5T, O5T-1 and O5T-2. The main difference between these entities are what they use to try to camouflage themselves with their surroundings, being a school bell, a siren, or a street light. Regardless, they are all extremely dangerous and should not be approached without proper force. If you do see one, however, immediately report it to facility staff, and the site that is designed to contain O5T will dispense a task force to come and contain it. Special containment procedures. Upon capture, O5T is to be equipped with infrared tracker, providing an invisible beacon visible by night vision when staff are required to interact with the subject. O5T and all of its variants must be kept in separate force simulation Faraday-lined cells, specifically designed to block all incoming and outgoing radio signals, effectively rendering O5T silent and unable to mimic new sounds which could possibly lure or damage mentally weak staff. Each cell is to be decorated with various different brush in order to mimic O5T's natural environment, prompting it to sit and wait for its prey. Alongside of this, the borders of its cell is to be electrified to discourage any attempts to escape. The cell is recommended to be kept in total blackness in order to mimic the night settings that O5T would expect. Class Keter. O6T is described as a worm-like entity known for hiding under long interstate highway bridges, hence its name. However, it has also been found to hide under small bridges, supposedly using a safe house tactic to travel lengthy distances without being spotted. However, this claim has no evidence of being true. The creature's arms are long, at a recorded distance of 9 feet, and it has bone-like fingers, similar to humans but far more flexible. O6T is a widespread threat, known to have a very stable population and therefore a huge amount of damage done to local human and animal populations. Because of these numbers, it is very difficult to contain, and any settings should be reported in order to keep a cap on this outbreak. O6T initially appears to be docile due to the flap of skin covering its true face, more horrific, fleshy mouth with bulging eyes. This is assumed to be a method of luring prey. O6T is mostly seen in adolescent or young forms. In the rare case one reaches its elder years, it will then be classified O6T-1. Their size becomes incomprehensibly large, creating a serious issue both in and out of containment, making both extremely difficult. Thus the Keter classification. Special containment procedures. SCP-06T is to be kept in a cylinder-type cell, reinforced on all sides. It is to be kept dark and have a depth of at minimum 50 meters. In order to prevent another O6T-1 event, any specimens that outgrow its containment are to be immediately terminated via the built-in fire system. Class Euclid. SCP-07T are described as grotesque, large quadrupeds with white, translucent, and hairless skin. They seemingly possess no outer dermal layer, with tendon and muscular structures being visible. They have 3 fingers, each of which has 3 or 4 joints. Their emaciated torso narrows from the shoulders to a slim waist. Spinal structure is visible, hence their thinness, with no tail or evidence of a digestive system on the outside. O7Ts have a peculiar behavior method where they sort of mimic the things around them, basically being aggressive when people are scared and being docile when people are friendly. However, this does make negative interactions twice as bad when faced with an untrained staff member. Special containment measures. SCP-07T are to be kept in a standard square enclosure with a one-way mirror so that they can be observed. A soundtrack of a human positively interacting with their German Shepherd is to be played on loop, keeping all the specimens docile. If interaction is necessary, for staff assistance or otherwise, trained professionals are the only staff authorized to interact with the instance of O7T. If an instance of O7T is for some reason aggravated by improper treatment by staff member is to be terminated and immediately replaced with a more proper trainer. Class Archon. SCP-08T is described as a horrifically disfigured creature with a somewhat human-like shape, dangling upside down, coming out of the ceiling in a heavily red-lighted room. The wrangled form appears to be made of a number of meaty strands with varying thickness, which connect and intertwine with each other in order to form a body that resembles a short humanoid shape with bent legs, long arms, and numerous holes. Now, 08T was initially thought to be a simple nightmare showing up in an occasional dream or two, but it would come to the attention of the Foundation when said people almost all all seemed to felt an overwhelming urge to go to this random spot in the middle of a random rural countryside. Families would even report their loved ones sleepwalking towards this location against their will. It was then that a task force was deployed to the location to see what would be going on. None of them returned. And the one that did was basically brain dead, mumbling about never to let it out. After looking over the body cam tapes, this creature was labeled SCP-08T. Special containment procedures. Under no circumstance is anyone to try to contain 08T, as it seems to be imprisoned as it is, and any disruptions could accidentally free it. A quarantine zone with around-the-clock motion systems and guards are to be established around the old building, making sure anyone who manages to make it here is stopped or, in extreme cases, neutralized. Last Keter. SCP-09T is described as having a fleshy appearance with almost pink skin, like raw meat, or again like that of a developing fetus. Their eyes bulge out from their head, and their mouth almost eerily smiles, revealing their gums and lack of any teeth. 08T is an extremely anomalous entity, said to originally emanate from a maternity ward in a hospital, and it is also theorized that he possesses the ability the most part will attack pregnant women, but this is not really confirmed. On top of all this, he is said to be completely silent, almost as if it was a TV channel that was muted, and this is just going to make containment that much more harder. Special containment procedures. 09T is yet to have been kept in containment for very long, almost as if it lacks physical form or is unable to be detected when breaking out. It has easily managed to sneak up and eliminate dozens of staff. This is not to mention when it does escape, finding 09T for containment takes weeks to months due to how successful it is at leaving no one to report it to. The containment they have developed is designed to eventually lure it inside, as it is located near multiple maternity wards, where it has recently been seen. It is to be kept in a standard holding cell with a long hallway at the end of it, equipped with dozens of motion sensors on every surface, but also is alerted when it tries to leave. The enclosure is to be heavily reinforced as to deter physical breakout attempts. Because of its extreme nature, a motion is currently in vote on whether 09T should just be terminated on site. 10T in its base form is often seen as two horrifyingly large rows of giant, unclean, and crooked teeth roughly affixed to dark red gums covered in a smooth, clear material not unlike saliva. While originally 10T was thought to just be a single door in a single location, research indicates that it is much worse than that, inhabiting many locations around the globe, seemingly at random, replacing doorways inside of buildings. And anyone who strayed close enough would immediately be terminated by it. It is also theorized that rather than just being a set of teeth, the door itself is actually some sort of gateway to a much larger entity that the teeth belong to. Meaning what we see here is likely just a part of the full creature. On top of this, reports have dictated sightings of designation 10T-1 seeming to be a humanoid corpse infested with a parasitic organism, assumably being expelled from 10T itself. 10T-1 is much more mobile and is able to move into areas where 10T itself cannot, assumably spreading or eliminating anyone in the vicinity. Special containment procedures. SCP-10T is near impossible to contain. However, attempts have been made in the past to lure 10T into a large containment facility full of various doorways and hallways. Due to its extreme hunger, many D-Class personnel are to be kept inside this facility, as well as the means to force the creature to stay inside the facility due to a somewhat consistent supply of food. No more than one D-Class a month are to be fed to this thing, as this will make sure it does not get completely satisfied and then try to escape containment. And all instances of 10T-1 that are seen outside this containment are either to be forced into the same block or terminated immediately. Class Apollyon. 11T when viewed is described as a thin humanoid skeleton with a large spinal column and 17 ribs in total, which is much less than the average human. Its face has a haunting expression, with its mouth agape and, strangely enough, its open eyelids made of skull bone. This, however, is only one of its forms. 11T, for lack of a more specific term, is a god trapped inside of a digital plane, possessing the ability to travel through connections into any number of devices, often simultaneously sending warnings days prior, like the feted king is coming, appearing almost like a virus across PCs. And while this does make it relatively easy to predict his arrival, the Foundation has never been able to 100% contain him, as there are thousands to millions of instances of him all over the world all at once, with him eventually emerging from the infected electronic and killing whoever is nearby. As previously stated, 100% containment is impossible. However, due to his advanced warnings, it is suggested that once infected, a civilian is to contact the 11T task group that will immediately deploy to the residence, seizing all electronics. And while this is inconvenient, it is better than the alternative. Instances of 11T are all to be placed inside of a quadruple layered, 400 square feet, Faraday cage, ensuring, similar to Siren Head, that no signals or internet is able to reach in or out, where each Faraday layer is further reinforced by titanium, and then concrete. No facility staff is to enter this enclosure, only dropping further instances of 11T through the designated chutes that have also been properly lined. Class Euclid. SCP-12T is described as a quadrupedal creature having notable physical resemblance to a horse. It has an unusually thin and long body with two black dot eyes that are oddly approximate to each other, seemingly pierced into it. And of course, the most notable trait of this creature, a 4-foot long proboscis with a sharp ending point directly connecting to the head, orientated downwards, giving it the appearance of a mosquito. It's a very active creature, with sightings all over various urban and rural centers. Approaching instances of 12T is not recommended, as it has been known to defend itself against civilians violently, using its needle to stab right through them, ultimately ending in their death. However, despite this, it is suggested that this creature is actually by nature docile and is mostly just looking to move on its own way without getting in interactions with humans at all. 12T is to be kept in a nature simulated cell, reinforced from all sides, and monitored for aggressive breaching behaviors. It is assumed not much more is needed, as other than its needle-like appendage, it's virtually harmless. Class Apollyon. SCP-13T is incredibly dangerous, and up to this point deemed unable to be contained. It seems to possess no legs, being held up by spindly arms and a spine. The body seems to have flesh or another red substance on it. The ribcage is large and has about 3 to 4 ribs on each side. The head is shaped almost like a needle. It isn't clear what this beak is made of. SCP-13T is incredibly anomalous and doesn't stay in one place for long. Brief glimpses of him are caught on the trail cams of wrecked vehicles, none of which the drivers were found alive. 13T has been incredibly devastating on the population, as every single time any driver runs over any sort of animal, or theorized to be in some cases insects, they are then forced into a devastating car crash where they do not survive. It is unknown whether accidental killings of these creatures invoke the same rage in 13T as non-accidental killings, but regardless, the deaths of many drivers, and in some cases even their passengers, are becoming more and more widespread. Despite tons of research, there's been no confirmed way to prevent this other than just being extremely careful when you're driving at any time. Special containment procedures. The SCP Foundation has begun an effort to put up thousands of signs in nature, warning civilians to decrease speed and watch the road. Efforts to physically contain 13T have all been met with failure, as it doesn't even seem to have a physical presence, almost like a shadow that appears in the rearview mirror. Even purposely having D-class personnel run over animals inside of the road-simulated containment facility have failed to keep 13T contained. Continue to monitor high-traffic areas for new warnings to be installed. Class Euclid. 14T is a mascot suit of a nondescript furry blue monster with a big mismatched googly eyes, a gaping lipless mouth, 2 Dealey Bobber style antennas sticking out from its head. Its legs are half the size of its long ape-like arms, and it has 3 digits on each foot. Judging by the size of its body it's holding, it stands roughly 12 to 15 feet tall, not counting the antenna. 14T is theorized to have a spirit inside of it, one upset from the death inside said costume. This causes 14T to be extremely aggressive and strong, being able to at times even attack people inside of cars. It is never recommended to approach 14T, as he will likely catch and maim you. Special containment procedure. 14T, being basically a sentient mascot costume, is to be vacuum sealed and put into a 4x4 metal reinforced crate, to be then put into a locked storage receptacle and then monitored by staff at all times. Class Euclid. 15T is a large house seemingly normal from the outside. On the inside, however, it is littered It is littered with holes that leak an unknown substance. This house was originally inhabited normally until suddenly the holes began to spread. It is unknown how deep the holes are, nor whether they can spread or not. Lurking around 15T is its only resident. SCP-15T-1, described as a white, bald humanoid marred by numerous black, oozing orifices scattered across their body. Their face, like the rest of its body, is covered by such dark holes, devoid of any discernible features like noses, ears, and a mouth. 15T-1 can move throughout the house at will, on both 2 and 4 limbs. 15T-1 is also known to climb on the ceilings and walls of 15T. Special containment procedures. 15T and 15T-1 are likely confined to a single location. All houses around this location are to be demolished, and a quarantine zone is to be set up. Anyone entering this quarantine zone is to be immediately shot or detained. If 15T-1 is seen leaving the house, it is to be shot down with no less than 50 high-caliber rounds, or until it is stopped moving for at least 20 minutes. In the event instances of 15T are spotted in surrounding homes, fire initiatives are to be set up, and they are to be burned down immediately. 16T and its counterpart 16T-1 are both Titanic-sized beings. 16T is described as a sort of quadrupedal creature whose neck sort of distorts upwards into what you could call a head inside of the clouds. This is where we see its many tendrils come down. These tendrils, on top of being able to reach the ground, have also been known to frequently grab civilians, throwing them through the clouds to their assumable deaths. The motive to this isn't entirely known, but between this and the damage from simply walking through cities, it holds a large casualty count. Alternatively, 16T-1 is described to be bony in appearance, with thin skin and visibly jagged ribs. It has 4 thick legs that has visibly taken on the shape of its bones, complete with holes that branch off to different bones. It has also strange protrusions on the joints of its forelegs. 16T-1 is just as damaging as 16T, if not more in some cases, causing excess amounts of buildings to catch flame around it. It is unknown what exactly starts these fires, only that they tend to follow 16T-1. Specialty containment procedures. Both 16T and 16T-1 have managed to evade containment frequently, breaking out of any restraints used. It has been recommended to the O5 Council to attempt lethal force on them both, but we are unsure if this would be very effective. At bare minimum, similar giant evacuation warning systems should be set up. Class Euclid. SCP-17T has been documented in many forms. However, the original form of 17T is presented like a large, burly humanoid creature with a misshapen face positioned right in front of the camera. This face is completely covered in smooth gray skin and in a consistent shocked expression. The creature also appears to lack any hair. The facial features are distorted and drooping in a single direction. Nothing else is seen of the creature past its neck and some of its shoulders. It is thought that this creature is summoned by watching a certain anomalous VHS tape, triggering 17T to appear and attack the person you viewed it. Originally, the tape would display it living inside of a sewer system and likely killing whoever managed to record it as well. Although originally just starting with 17T, eventually the facility would come to discover multiple other creatures that show up in a similar fashion. 17-1 was originally woodland footage before an extremely odd creature vaguely resembling a deer appeared on the camera, over time distorting to reveal it was anything but a normal deer sighting. 17T-2 will appear upstairs or in the attic of anyone who manages to trigger its aggression. Whether that is viewing it on tape is unconfirmed. It appears as a strange humanoid creature peeking down the top of a staircase in an old decrepit house. Only its head, a possible torso, and the hands of the creature is visible. The creature's head is human-like enough, although it's missing a few facial features. While some are exaggerated, the mouth is in an extremely large smile, wide agape. It covers a large chunk of the face and appears to be permanently fixed in that position. The only recovered witness managed to utter that it came to meet him, before going into a catatonic state. Finally, 17T-3 was originally recorded running across an old road into the forest, appearing as a massive hexapodal, which is 6-limbed, entity walking on a dimly lit road. It appears to be a physical combination of many different types of animals. 17T-3 being the largest of the four, it likely carries the largest threat. Do not view these tapes under any circumstances, and the tape itself is to be classified as 17T-4. Special containment measures. All instances of 17T are to be immediately confiscated by the Foundation and kept inside of a quadruple layer lockbox. Only level 5 staff or higher are to access this lockbox. All of the physical manifestations of 17-T have not been as of now located by the facility, but any settings of them in the future are to be immediately terminated in order to protect the future viewers of the tapes. If these efforts are not successful, reclassification of 17-T into a higher containment level are to be considered by the O5 Council. You've been chosen to look over Trevor Henderson's entity log.
I have taken the liberty of researching the deadliest and most disturbing and unique of the bunch. In each log, you will find the sightings reports, overall fear factor, theorized and canon abilities, and their overall destruction on humanity. With this, we can build a list of the most unfair Trevor Henderson creatures, but stick around until the very end, because not only can the entities lose their spot on the list as it goes on, but those who complete all the logs will access a bonus entry that is one of Trevor's least known and rare entities. Category Giant. Quantity, likely anywhere from 50 to hundreds. Wildfire giants are mysteries of nature, but ones that should be avoided at all costs. Rather than being a single entity, wildfire giants are thought to make up an entire species of unfathomably large Titanic beings. Now, these entities were first sighted in the midst of a great Californian wildfire, and assumably most people who saw them didn't believe what they were seeing, and I can't say that I blame them. And as if these disasters didn't cause enough damage on their own, these things would definitely be adding to the chaos. But I have a theory that since you will commonly see versions of wildfire giants with no fire present, in my opinion, I think these giants, rather than being an effect of wildfires, are more like a cause of them, and can likely control them at will. Not to mention the death that they could cause by simply crushing anything in its path. Others have also made theories that they are able to duplicate at will, slowly moving across the land and spreading as it goes, similar to a wildfire itself. So the total destruction capability is honestly unmatched. Other than the whole incomprehensible cosmic fear of something this size not only being possible, but there being many of them, they aren't actually too scary based on looks alone. But I can't pretend that I wouldn't be frozen in fear if I was waltzing along on my night walk and turned only to see these things slowly coming closer in the distance. And by the looks of it, they also come with a huge cloud of fog. So we'd be blind and on fire. That's great. Regardless, since it's our first entity, they're gonna secure the #1 spot for now. But will the next log shake up the lineup? Category: Disguised Parasite. Quantity: Single entity. An abandoned location exploration turned into a horror show. Someone staying after hours too late. Or simply just driving down the wrong road at the wrong time. But one thing is for sure, and that is no Trevor Henderson list is complete without the addition of Cartoon Cat, as it is said to be the most dangerous entity by both Trevor himself and a lot of the fan base, despite it sometimes having a less than disturbing appearance. The cartoon alias is actually by design, being used to lure people, and as messed up as it would sound, likely children to be devoured. Described by Trevor Henderson himself as a rot older than most people realize, it has likely perfected the ability to kill quickly and effectively. Its abilities are too many to list, and it doesn't seem to give anyone a chance to even run away. Its height varies greatly, and it could assumably break in anywhere if it needs to, not to mention altering its form. There's only one of them because there only needs to be one, and Trevor put it best in his tier list when he said, "Too late." The total destruction of Cartoon Cat would likely just be limited to the amount of people it kills, and that number is largely unknown. Not to mention, it is likely quick and leaves no trace when it comes to these. So how would Cartoon Cat stand up to, say, the wildfire giants? Cartoon Cat, being outnumbered and outsized, would have a run for its money, despite it being the most deadly. I feel like it doesn't quite compare to the sheer destruction of these creatures. And I know I'm gonna get burned at the stake for this, but Cartoon Cat could only really kill so many people at a time, while these giants could assumably kill thousands in a matter of minutes without even trying. So in my opinion, they'll be keeping their #1 spot for now. Category: Stalking Creature. Quantity: Unknown. Our third report would originate from 2 teens going free camping in the middle of the woods, from which only one of them would return. After he recovered from his trauma, he was able to tell the story on what happened during the trip. He talks about how everything would start out normal with just simply the sounds of birds and the occasional bug or two, until eventually something would be caught in the corner of their eyes. Something that appeared like a towering shadow off in the distance. After disappearing from the view, it began to appear more and more often just out of sight, until eventually it stopped trying to hide, looking down at them with a pale face and eyes that looked almost painted on, and an unhinged jaw. And unlike most creatures that we've seen, it was in broad daylight. In an attempt to escape, they ran to their vehicle, and despite believing it wasn't following them, it appeared in their rearview mirror, and the car would not start. After waiting for hours for anything to happen, it got dark and they lost track of its location. When one of them finally decided to attempt to jumpstart the car, he never returned. The survivor would then be found days later, petrified and in shock, and there were no additional images that were ever recovered. This creature was appropriately named a lurking presence after the feeling that they got when they first would arrive. And while terrifying, this creature doesn't quite outweigh them, in my opinion, in terms of fear factor, and especially psychological damage. Hell, I know it's fake, and I still don't want to sleep outside after seeing this thing. Regardless, it's going to be in our number 3 spot on our list as of now. Category: omnipresent deity. Quantity: everywhere. This one has been a widespread issue for a while now. Thousands of reports have come in from all over the world, and they all possess similar stories. A devastating car crash resulting in the death of everyone inside. For a while, this would seem like all coincidences, until a theory would be created that they all had something to do with people who had just hit animals and turned them into roadkill, as their cars often possess dents of various sizes and spots, as well as large amounts of animal blood. To test this theory, we ended up looking for dashcam footage from one of these accidents, and sure enough, they were able to catch brief footage of a disturbing creature that we are now calling the God of Roadkill, a being that appears to be just a spine with chunks of flesh adorning it along with multiple eyes. It is unknown whether it has mercy for accidental killings or if it simply treats all of them the same. Regardless, this is a worldwide issue, but how does it stand up to our list? Well, it is assumed upwards of 5 million animals are killed daily, which would lead to far more deaths than anything on our list so far, and likely the most destruction. And if this became widespread, most people would be afraid to drive, and those that did would die out quickly. And this would cause massive chaos all over the world. So in my opinion, it's only fair to give the God of Roadkill our top spot on this list. Category: mutated insect. Quantity: likely thousands. If you come into contact with this being, it is crucial that you leave immediately and make sure that everybody you have with you or that is around you does not get taken by any of these entities. As for every living organism that this thing manages to get a hold of, hundreds of larvae will be laid inside of them, and humanity will be that much more at risk. The original sighting of these horrific entities came from a group of people exploring the ruins of a private testing lab that had been long abandoned. We are unsure how the hell such an abomination came to be. We do know, however, that apart from acting like an overgrown fly, thus the name, it possesses an extremely long proboscis capable of injecting an organism with a necrosis-inducing venom that melts down the flesh. Following this process, the housefly will lay up to hundreds of different eggs inside of the bodies, and then when they hatch, they will feed upon the remains until they reach maturity, and then the cycle will repeat itself. And due to the size of these creatures, this would be absolutely catastrophic for people as a whole. So it's crucial that you do not let yourself fall victim to this phenomenon. In comparison to the others on the list, it can potentially turn huge cities of people into maggot-infested grave sites, which, while equally horrific and damaging, it's not quite the death rate of the God of Roadkill, but it comes very, very close to the wildfire giants. But since they are much larger and possess the same duplication ability, I would say the housefly gets third on our list. Category: oversized fetal humanoid. Quantity: unknown. No one was ever really able to confirm what started the fire at the hospital, but we believe that is where all of this began. First, it was simply a few reports, then people began disappearing left and right. After making a map of the disappearances, it all started to create a pattern, like a wave emanating from the burned maternity ward. Rumors would then start to go around that rather than the typical kidnapper or murderer, it was more like some sort of fucked up creature they were calling the Pink Man after his weird deformed appearance. But for all intents and purposes, we will be referring to it as the Forgotten Baby. Horrified homeowners have managed to take a limited amount of photos of the creature, only a few of which can be recovered from their empty homes, although not all of them are confirmed. This creature has been described to authorities as incredibly silent, despite its large size, almost as if it was a TV channel that had been muted. Yet the creature still manages to move, and there were no signs of forced entry, nor did anyone know where it went. But there has yet to been any survivors, and its motive is still unknown. It is thought that the majority of the victims would be pregnant women, but there is no evidence that exactly confirms this. It's also unsure on whether this is a physical being or a manifestation of an enraged spirit. Regardless, it seems to be slightly less dangerous than Cartoon Cat and operates in a smaller radius. But in comparison to a lurking presence, the creature being able to enter your home seems far more dangerous and overall more psychologically damaging. We'll be getting the number 5 slot on our list for now. Category: dimensional entity. Quantity: likely millions. This entity is probably one of the least known creatures on this list, so it's going to be extremely theoretical. However, what we can assume is that these creatures exist on a different plane of reality than us. Whenever you stand in front of a mirror or see your reflection, they're likely observing you and waiting for an opportunity. Now, it is unknown if these things, apart from appearing in mirrors, can actually mimic your look as a form of camouflage or simply to lull you into a false sense of security, but as a device to at least stay a few feet away from your reflection at all times, as we have no idea what this other dimension would even look like, and there have been no indication of hope that you can ever make it back from here. It is assumed that they are torn apart and possibly even corrupted into madness until they become one of these entities themselves, similar to the retch process in the back rooms. But as I mentioned before, this is just a theory. We're also unsure on whether an individual can do something in order to make themselves a target, and then every reflection will contain these creatures until they are grabbed, or if it's more like random and spontaneous. It is crucial to be cautious and observant to see if your reflections start exhibiting odd behaviors. But compared to everything else, it's not really as horrific and devastating, as technically all this is speculated and we don't exactly know how often this could happen and if it's all reflections or just specific mirrors. Because of this, we're going to be putting these mirror entities in our 7th spot. Category: humanoid imitator. Quantity: everywhere. Quantity: anywhere from hundreds to thousands. The culmination of a horrific phone call and what's left of a senior community completely gutted by cricket-like creatures meant to mimic a sleepwalking elder. And to make things worse, these creatures were long gone by the time anyone would arrive. They seem to thrive off of this feeble cover as a way to get their victims and then bring their remains back to their nest, kind of similar to ants or other bugs. And to make this even weirder, after these people were killed, no one would come to remember them, not even their loved ones or anyone else on their record for that matter. It's almost as if that once they are killed, all memory of them is wiped off the face of the earth, which is going to make things a little bit more difficult. Not to mention their function similar to a hive mind, serving one female known as the Old Lady, similar to a queen of sorts. It is unknown where exactly these things nest, but that doesn't make them any less horrific. There have only thus far been notes of elder facilities being targeted. These entities could easily sweep the streets, devouring anyone unlucky enough to be walking nearby, making them fuel for the hive. Sleepwalkers have really only been canonically confirmed to attack old people homes, so it doesn't really make them a huge threat to humanity as a whole. At least not as much as the others, so they're going to take the lowest spot on our list. Category: structure mimic. Quantity: unknown, but likely many. This entity is as iconic as it is dangerous. Siren Head and other entities by the same species are giant creatures that use common, similarly built structures as camouflage. It acts as any other predator would, laying in wait and trying to lure anything close enough for it to make its move and ambush them. Most victims can never outrun Siren Head in time, as they don't really expect it to be as close to home as it ends up being. And they believe the common myth that Siren Head is only seen in remote places, like for an example, a forest or field in the middle of nowhere. And while this is partially true, there have been many images existing on common streets, graveyards, neighborhoods, homesteads, and even school grounds, especially when it comes to the bell ringer. It is unknown how many of these there are because of how good they are at hiding, so you never can really be sure if your path to schoolwork is completely safe after all, especially if you begin to hear random unnerving sirens through the fog. The Siren Head species has assumably culled thousands of victims, so it takes a solid spot on our list, placing right over the forgotten baby.
Imagine for a second you're on your way home at night and you've missed the public bus. The streets are dimly lit, and to your horror, you can just about make out a horrifically tall and mangled being in front of you. But which one is it? One of the surreal, unhinged creations of Dr. Nowhere, or the iconically brutal and disturbing entities of Trevor Henderson? One of these is going to be way worse than the other, but which one is it? Today we're going to be looking into Dr. Nowhere versus Trevor Henderson, and to be honest, they both put up a good fight. So let's find out for certain if Dr. Nowhere versus Trevor Henderson isn't close. Now, before I move forward, I just want to state that I am huge fans of both of these artists, and I love both of their work, and I've made tons of videos on both of them. This is purely just going to be a points based system, and each point is like opinionated, and if at any point you disagree with who I give the point to, if you make a good point, I'll like your comment. With that being said, let's get into the first category, being comparing their most viral entities. Starting with Trevor Henderson, we have Cartoon Cat and of course Siren Head, the former of which is essentially a cosmic parasite, a rot so to speak, that disguises itself as a cartoon character like something straight from Bendy. It can assumably take any size or form it wishes, along with being anywhere and everywhere at once. Cartoon Cat assumably devours flesh and thrives off of it. No one knows whether it's immortal, but based on what we know, there's a pretty good chance it is. On top of being one of the most viral entities, it is also described by Trevor himself to be one of the most overpowered, being the top of the too late category, even being placed ahead of the man with the upside down face. Alternatively, his other most famous creation, Siren Head, is a sort of mimic of a being, and it's really what broke him out into being a famous indie horror artist. Siren Head is essentially designed to look and sound like many different similar shaped structures, assumably making it harder to detect before it's too late. While being 12 meters tall and relatively slow on 2 feet, it has been brought to my attention that it can run on all fours, and when it does, it becomes significantly faster, being said to be able to keep up with a speeding car. So in my case, that would be about 100 miles per hour at least. As for the reference, they were talking about it being able to catch a couple who were driving for their lives. Siren Head doesn't just make siren noises despite how it looks, it also can imitate any person or noise it hears, kind of like SCP-939. Although despite this, it doesn't seem to actually need to hear them in order to repeat them, rather getting them through a certain radio frequency that is built into its biology. Both Siren Head and Cartoon Cat are extremely disturbing entities, so what do the Doctor know are counterparts?
That something is following you as soon as you turn off the lights? Well, worry not. We have a brilliant solution. There is nothing that follows you after you turn off all the lights in the house.
In my opinion, they would be none other than the Boiled One and the Locust, as they by far have more views than anything else on Nowhere's channel, with the Boiled One being classified as his own analog horror and essentially being the manifestation of a Japanese war criminal that was somehow turned into a demonic creature after his death. The Boiled One, for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist in the normal plane of reality. Rather, it acts like a mind virus, first infecting every digital device, then corrupting anyone who views it and remembers his face. This will eventually shut down every nerve in the body, apart from the eyes, forcing the victim to just lay in eternal torment while the Boiled One manifests in front of them, torturing and just overall just scaring the hell out of them. Not to mention, it is assumed that the Boiled One is awaiting some sort of hell itself to pour into reality, which doesn't sound good no matter what it actually entails. To back it up, the Locust is similarly another digital entity that by default I've theorized to exist in a bizarre alternative dimension next to what seems like its heart. The Locust seems to gain access to locations via web calls or other digital or analog forms of communication. It does this by posing as loved ones or simply just another human, only for it to appear on your screen and begin breaking through it. Once it escapes, it takes its true physical form, which is an insanely tall entity that specializes in finding you and hunting you down. The Locust's most unique ability is when it comes into physical contact, it can easily remove all of your internal organs without even breaking the skin, leaving the bodies quote-unquote appearing untouched. With that being said, who would win this category? I would say the Locust is very situational, and he can be easily avoided by simply just unplugging your TV or something. When you come into contact with Siren Head, it's completely random. You can get lured. It is rumored he can also kill via his sound waves, and him being able to go as fast as a moving car just kind of steals the deal. In my opinion, Trevor wins this section. I want to next compare which artist is more disturbing as a whole. Now, since this is largely subjective, I'm going to do my best to give a fair comparison, as both have technically scared me at one point in time when I first discovered them. Trevor Henderson, being the original to draw in this realistic real-life style, does an amazing job of making it seem like you are personally coming into contact with these things in your day-to-day life. However, one thing Dr. Nowhere does have over Trevor is a lot of his work is animated, mainly the Boiled One, Locust, the Oddity Compendium, and a lot of others. Despite entities like Mr. Mascot, the Forgotten Baby, and the Body of the Pig being absolute nightmare fuel, I think currently Nowhere does deserve this point, as I think nowadays Nowhere's entities are a lot more disturbing to me. But what do you guys think? For our next section, I think this video would be a lot more interesting if we did one focusing on survivability. And since I've technically made survival videos on them both, I can easily compare the two and see which one is significantly worse. When it comes to Silas's verse, there are a lot of entities that mess with your mind, stalk you, and distort your body to the point where you're not even you anymore. And to explain exactly what I mean by that, I'm going to be going over the corrupted soil and the fungus. The fungus is a disturbing plant-like entity that spreads into both living and non-living items over time. They incubate and gigantic mushrooms begin to sprout out, themselves emitting more spores, and the cycle repeats. The problem is when it comes into contact with humans, it appears to replace the entire skeletal structure, ending the person in the process and replacing them with another one of these mushroom entities. I've assumed something like this would make life very difficult in affected towns, and on top of this, similar to the fungus, there's another blight labeled the corrupted soil, said to stem from one large graphic mass and sprouting through the soil hundreds of miles in every direction. When it comes in contact with populated homes, everything living inside is then horribly disfigured. This is not even to mention the mind-corrupting creatures such as the previously mentioned Boiled One, the Dream Demon MT3, and Cone Zones, all of which, in summary, melt your sanity as they trap you in permanent hells, where all you can do is be tormented by them. Now, Trevor Henderson's verse is like a whole different beast. Putting the cartoon cat aside for now, I'm going to be focusing mainly on the man with the upside-down face and the Forgotten Baby. Now, I have been told in my comments that the Forgotten Baby mainly targets pregnant women, but I wasn't able to actually find a source that confirms that. Mostly just that it originated from an accident in the maternity ward and then spreads out from hospitals, breaking into people's homes, and just completely wiping them out. It shares the too late section with the cartoon cat and essentially has never been escaped. On top of this, it is incredibly silent and disturbing, being described as a muted TV channel. On top of this, we have the absolute demon of terrible freak accidents, otherwise known as the man with the upside down face, who essentially is invisible to 90% of people, with the 10% being extremely young children that most people don't believe until it's too late. The man is essentially a manifester of major accidents that he is said to have been seen in the background of. When looking in photos taken just prior, he is always there, causing car crashes, plane malfunctions, construction accidents, the list goes on. This ends up with thousands of casualties of people that don't even know he was there. To top this all off, what really makes Trevor's universe unsurvivable is just the sheer scale of entities that you have to deal with. You have ones that sit on the trains, you have ones on buses, in the water, you have massive giant entities that level cities, you have digital entities. My point is there isn't anywhere you can go where there wouldn't be something horrific, so I'm going to go ahead and give this one to Trevor. When it comes to comparing which universe has more content and is more fleshed out and looking into the backstories, you really have two different pictures to paint. Trevor's images, for the most part, come from one of two places, either one of his socials or through his podcast, the Mayfair Watchers Society, which actually gives context on a lot of his entities, two notable ones being the Anxious Dogs and the Scissors entity, which notably is another ode to why Trevor's universe is just hell on earth. Scissors, for those unfamiliar, infects houses and in turn neighborhoods. Once a place is infected, it is assumed he will appear sort of like a spirit and chase down any living creatures, goring them with its sharp appendages. Now, as I've mentioned a few times before in this video, Trevor has made a tier list based on how dangerous these things are, which has also been a huge help for figuring out context on a lot of these things. Other than that, the intrigue of his images come from just how unfathomable they are, and how they do come from the perspective of someone just strolling along on a walk and then suddenly noticing something that they will probably never understand. Alternatively, Silas, as I've mentioned a few sections back, takes a very different approach to his artwork. Rather than putting them all as obvious posts, you really have to search for his work, with it being split between many socials, mainly his Instagram and his YouTube channel. Most of his work, from the Boiled One TOE tapes and the Oddity Compendium, you again see a much broader picture being painted for a lot of his entities. With that being said, a lot of his entities do seem to be sort of lost. And when I say lost, I mean lost to my standards in the fact that I cannot figure out where the hell most of them come from and their original sources. And in that regard, they do have a lot of the same mystery that Trevor's do. But the fact that he even has his own analog horror series based off one of his entities honestly says it all. However, it is worth noting that Trevor has an extremely large fanverse, with Siren Head alone having upwards of like 20 indie horror games made from it. On top of this, many people have made animated versions of Trevor's work, but I don't think fan work can count towards this, as it's not technically made by them, just inspired. So based off the sheer volume of animated and fleshed out lore made for his entities, I'm gonna have to give this one to him. Now, earlier in the video I went over the most viral entities, and I've been kind of throwing around the word lost entities a lot, so I'm gonna go ahead and compare the lost entities of both Dr. Nowhere and Trevor Henderson in the case that they're very rare and a lot of people don't even know they exist. But with that being said, I did have to do a lot of digging for these, but I did manage to find a lot of interesting ones that I'd never heard about before on Trevor's website. This first entity I'm going to be talking about looks like something you'd be finding in an abandoned grocery store, in a scenario sort of like this. Picture you're doing some early 3 a.m. shopping at one of those 24-hour stores. Weird old-timey music is playing over the speakers. It's a bit creepy, but you hear another shopper a few aisles down, so it's not that bad. Suddenly, every single light goes off and you're just barely able to see the light of some of the freezers. Calling out for some sort of staff doesn't prove to be useful at all, as all you can hear is your own voice echoing off the walls of the near empty store. Well, that and the sound of the other customer's cart coming closer. You assume he probably is just as confused as you are. But when it starts to get closer, you start to hear a weird crushing sound, almost as if flesh is being run over. Suddenly the sound stops one aisle over, and after what seems like forever, you look up and notice a deformed and almost melted imitation of a head peering over the top of the aisle at you. In shock of what you're even looking at, you watch in horror as the head disappears down and the noise begins to get closer again. Running for the front door didn't really do you any good, as the lack of power essentially makes them near impossible to open. It is only then that you turn around to briefly get a look at this abomination. Now, of course, that's just my guess on what the backstory could be, and Trevor himself likely has something completely different. But regardless, the next things I wanted to include in this is something that actually caught me off guard when I was watching the recent horror movie Tarot. Essentially, I couldn't express how excited I was figuring out that Trevor Henderson actually designed all the entities in the movie. And I don't know how I called it, but I was just so used to making videos on him that I noticed the style way before I even looked, and then I managed to confirm it online. And this isn't even covering the dozens of entities hidden on the wiki that most people probably haven't even seen because of how incredibly obscure a lot of them are. With this in mind, we would likely expect Trevor to easily get this point, but to be honest, it wasn't that simple. Dr. Nowhere's entities, like I mentioned before, are split into two. The ones that you can obviously see on his socials, and then the ones that are a little bit more hidden that you really only see in his quick compilations that are thrown up on his Instagram. Most of these are likely hidden on a Patreon or something like that, but most casual fans aren't able to see it. So I was able to do some digging and figure out some cool ones. My favorite of which would likely play out something like this. Picture you show up for school or work one day, only to realize that your friend isn't there. A few days go by and still nothing. Now, this does start to worry you, but you're really unable to do much, so you just start your way home, only for this poster to catch your eye. Before the instinct to GTFO kicks in, you see a balloon in the corner of your eye, and with it, a long hand grab your shoulder. I think you found who took your friend. To be honest, it's just the tip of the iceberg for the illegal balloon salesman. And I technically didn't even need to create a scenario around this image for it to be bizarre, as it already has a couple other oddities that are listed on its wiki article, like each balloon containing odd surprises, such as an embryo that, when placed in gasoline of all things, grows into a direct copy of itself and duplicates it, and so on and so forth. He also has a few other noticeably interesting ones, such as the Doctor, which is essentially a gigantic entity that shows up in photograph before taking you from existence, as well as a gigantic flea that assumably drains people to death, all while possessing a haunted humanoid face. And similar to Trevor, many others. So for this one, I can't possibly give either a point, as both have amazing rabbit holes that you can dive down in your spare time, and almost guaranteed find an entity that you've never thought of before. Next up, as I mentioned, I've done survival videos on both of them, but I've also given them both episodes in my Your Life In series, which is essentially going over the quality of life in each universe. So I'm going to be comparing the two to see which one actually has a worse quality of life. To start off, Silas's universe is particularly inconvenient because it renders a lot of the things that we're used to using either unusable or incredibly limited due to the dangers that come with it. For example, the Boiled One and the Locust make all electronics risky because it's essentially how they get in. On top of that, Philbism is a rampant mind virus that essentially makes you digest wooden chairs as a religion. All it takes is a random ad, and then boom, your new life goal is to ingest as many chairs as possible. With this in mind, phones, TVs, PCs, and most other electronics would all be huge liabilities. On top of this, you would also have to check every single room in your house on a consistent basis and keep a high sense of morality, as if you manage to slip up and do something morally questionable, I'll just say, a disturbing rendition of an angel will appear and burn you to death. Now, if all that seems bad to you, you really haven't seen anything yet. In Trevor's universe, you are basically guaranteed death, not just because you'll be found, but I would like to bet that you'd be throwing yourself to one of them after living for more than a few minutes here. Basically, to start off, just forget feeling safe in your house, as there will consistently be things staring at you through your windows, breaking in through your vents, or simply just appearing in your bedroom. And even if you do manage to bunker yourself in and I guess have a ton of luck, there will still be a serious risk of your entire house just being completely leveled by a Titanic-sized entity. So what are your other options? As we've established, you can't really go anywhere to avoid these things, and that includes shopping, school, work, the movie theater, a nature walk, and pretty much any other place that you can think of. So with that in mind, Trevor definitely wins this section, and it's not even close for this one. Coming back to the intro of this video, I want to go over each one's physical entities, basically the threats that are right in front of you. When it comes to these, Dr. Nowhere has his fair share, as we have bigger entities like Amber, the Obelisk, the Birthday Giant, and one I just recently discovered called the Griever of Lavender Skies, which itself is almost a haunting mystery. All I was able to figure out about it is that it stands about as tall as a telephone line and appears to have nothing inside of it, along with most of its appendages removed. Regardless of what it is, I don't think I'd ever want to come into contact with something like this, especially not at night on the way home. Now, all of these bigger entities, unlike Trevor's giants, are extremely big, enough to be threatening, but they're not too big to the fact that they wouldn't bother with you. So it's sort of a terrifying medium. On top of this, Nowhere also has a lot of smaller entities that would have no problem making their way into your home. I'm mostly talking about Father Fester and Black Hat Trench, both of which I've went over in my survival videos, and they would likely mean you're going to be forced to pack up and move across the country. Not to mention the follower that appears anywhere when you turn the lights off, and it will immediately try and run you down. So with that being said, what does Trevor have to counter this? Starting with his giants, they are definitely what you would call something to behold. From the Birdwatcher and the Wandering Faith, who, if you're unfamiliar, specializes in sort of fishing around with its tentacles for people to personally deliver to heaven, so to speak. And they honestly keep getting larger all the way up to the Behemoth, which I don't even know how it doesn't just destroy the entire planet. When it comes to Trevor's smaller entities, however, we have a ton to choose from. From Body of a Pig, Mr. Mascot, whatever the hell this abomination is, the VHS creature, the roving man. The amount of creatures as mentioned before is just unfathomable, and that's not even going over the earlier mentions like Cartoon Cat and the assumably similar entity Cartoon Dog. In my opinion, Nowhere's universe honestly can't compete on this one either. In all fairness, Trevor has had far more time to create hundreds of these things, and a majority of them are physical entities. Alternatively, we also are going to be looking over psychological entities, which are more Nowhere's strength. Hell, both of his most popular entities are psychological. On top of this, we have Cone Zones, who appear only in psych wards to torment already mentally affected patients. We have Neff, who honestly is pretty confusing, but my best guess is that it's some sort of deformed protagonist of a lost TV show in the verse. We have Empty.3, It honestly seems like psychological and digital entities make up a good portion of Silas's verse. Not to mention, there really isn't that many Trevor entities to go up against in this category, apart from maybe the Fetid King and Bonesworth. Now, I could be wrong with this one, and there might be a lot of psychological Trevor entities that I'm missing, so feel free to let me know down in the comments if there's any that come to your mind. As of now, this point is going to go to nowhere. To finish off the video, we have the most interesting category in my opinion, which is essentially how much of humanity would be completely wiped out by these creatures suddenly becoming real. Because being honest, I don't think most of us are going to be surviving either verse. Hell, Trevor's giants alone are going to wipe out most cities, almost as if they got hit by a hurricane or a massive earthquake. We are talking like hundreds of deaths just by walking, and even more if it was somehow aggravated. Cartoon Cat, being generous, assumably takes at least dozens of lives per day, as it can be anywhere it wants and no one has been known to be able to escape it. You add on to that the scissors neighborhoods, bridge worms, and highway worms picking off anyone that uses a bridge, and you are already looking at thousands dead every day just from those. And then we have the smoking gun, the god of roadkill. The god of roadkill, for those unaware, guarantees death for anyone who runs over any kind of animal, and statistics show in the US alone, even lowballing it, upwards of 500,000 animals are hit by cars every day, which it is unknown if every accident would count towards this, but even if you take a fraction, let's say 10,000 of those people are then forced into a car crash, it would be mayhem. World population would crash within a year, and it's likely it would be halved at bare minimum. So can Dr. Nowhere beat this number? Well, the short answer, being honest, not really. And that's because that's often not the point. Many of Silas's creatures are designed to be weirdly comforting, but at the same time, incredibly disturbing. But the ones that do, as I mentioned before, for the most part, torture, not kill, which is arguably worse. But we do have a few entities that would put them fairly close, mainly the Onclager and Philbus. You've probably heard of multiple times before, but the Onclager would be the majority of what puts the deaths on the map, as basically anyone who has been consistently morally evil has the chance of attracting one. They can be anything from short and human-sized to gigantic and horrific. Regardless, the only reason this doesn't win nowhere at this point is because of the fact that most of the time people get an option to repent for what they did and be genuinely remorseful, and if they are, it will leave them alive. Locust is also another thing that would be adding on to this, but in the end I think Trevor inches the point for this one. So it seems that Trevor is going to be the winner of this video. However, it is a lot closer than I initially thought it was going to be when I made this video. But this doesn't surprise me too much, as Nowhere, in my opinion, is the only other artist that comes close in this genre. Whether you need to run for your life or have nothing to fear, some are obvious, while others may be deceiving. Do you know which is which? This is the 7 levels of Trevor Henderson entity, including data from even Trevor himself. Make sure to watch all the way to level 7 for the ones that you stand no chance of getting away from.
Level 1, harmless.
Despite how some of them might look, level 1 entities will rarely if ever harm you. Some of them are even looking to help you. Longhorse is likely the first one in this category that everyone thinks of due to the ability to predict and even warn disasters. That being said, it's still creepy as fuck, and I'd likely be over my back fence on a plane to Barbados before I could even tell whatever the hell it was warning me for. And in that case, I guess it would probably be the plane crash. The Watchtower is another official example. It is claimed to watch over towns with its large size and not have any interest in killing humans. There is also a side of level 1 that is more on the mischievous side, but still not very harmful. Here we would see entities like Little Nugget, being simply the excess flesh that falls off of Big Charlie, who surprisingly is docile and mostly acts like normal cows, as that's basically what it is, a mutated cow. Bonesworth also fits here, as it cares more about pissing you off and keeping you up at night than actually causing physical harm. And believe it or not, the marionette actually doesn't cause harm either. It simply freaks everyone out by moving around to music that no one has any idea where it's coming from, and then rises into the sky. An honorable mention here is the roving moon, which again I wouldn't have guessed due to its appearance, but based on Trevor himself, it's docile.
Level 2, situationally dangerous.
In level 2, we're going to be focusing more on entities that are dangerous, but really only in a very specific circumstance or one specific location. So most of the time, you'll be fine because you'll either never encounter these entities or never do the one thing that pisses them off. For example, the chicken god kills you only if you eat chicken around it. The smile room, you know, the giant pair of teeth, is extremely hostile but only exists in a limited location. So if you technically stay clear, you'll never have to worry about it. The next one I'm kind of conflicted about, which is the god of roadkill, as it technically would fit here, as it only attacks you or causes you to crash if you run over animals or living things. But a lot of people run over animals like all the fucking time, sometimes without even noticing it, and I feel like this would cause an insane amount of deaths over time. So I'll let y'all decide for that one. Others in this category include the upstairs man, the Hokkaido hands, and the hole man, as again, one spot. And another one that I'm considering putting here is the VHS creature, at least the first one, because it only attacks things that find a very specific VHS tape, and who the fuck uses VHS anymore? I mean, I'm not dissing on VHS, I love VHS, but I'm saying like majority of people don't use VHS anymore, and in that case, the people who do use it would have to specifically find that one little tape, and I feel like after the first person accidentally stumbles into it, yes, they would die, but then it would probably get sold at an auction or thrown in the trash in a landfill or stuffed in the back of a closet, and no one would ever find that shit again, leaving its death toll really, really low.
Level 3, unknown, don't risk it.
Okay, so going forward, as you're probably going to notice throughout this video, Trevor Henderson entities are majority dangerous as hell. So you're going to see the least amount of entities in level 1, a little bit more in level 2. We're going to see a lot in level 3 because it's kind of in the middle or unknown. And then when you get to level 4, 5, 6, and 7, it is going to have essentially the most entities, and those sections are going to be the longest. So just throwing that out there. Level 3, as I mentioned, are entities that don't really have solid proof they're harmless, but don't really have solid proof that they're dangerous either. So it's kind of up to you, and most of these are probably going to be like a don't risk it sort of situation. Trevor's recent works depict this heavily, as he has a few that seem to appear in hotel halls and staircases, and since they're basically everywhere, we can assume they're likely dangerous. Entities that we can't really comprehend also float around this area, such as the Void Nugget, the Smile Host, the Classroom, the Moon Worshippers, who basically do exactly what the name sounds like they do, and of course the Singing Clergyman, whose ability could very well be concerning or completely harmless, being able to put whoever discovers it into an obsession state, needing to come back to wherever they found it in order to keep listening to its song, who most claim is the voice of God. Another example would be the Good Boy, a supposedly somewhat dog-like entity that looms around places with only the sound of static being present. They're often multiple at once, and they appear to enjoy stalking people. No one really knows its intent, and honestly it's likely malevolent, so it's best to keep away. But it doesn't really state anywhere that they are for sure dangerous, so this is really the highest I can put them. I am once again conflicted about putting anxious dogs here because, as people know, because I've talked about them quite a few times, they match people's attitude very closely, meaning if you act scared, you're dead. If you act nice towards them and treat them like a pet, they will never attack you. So it's exactly what this place encompasses of the fact that it's in the middle, sort of. But thinking about it logically, I feel like a majority of people would react to this extremely negatively, because who the fuck would see that walking down the street and then immediately assume, oh, I'm gonna go pet that thing? Not really many people. So I would assume that unless you're specifically trained or you know what this thing is, you're probably not making it out of an encounter. Finishing up this category, you just have the entities that seem to mostly just enjoy watching you and not really attacking you. But no one can really guarantee your safety, or more importantly, your sanity, since you're being watched by these things. This includes the Peeping Tom and the Numbered Humanoid. But what do y'all think should be included in this category? Let me know down in the comments.
Level 4, don't get close.
Level 4 is where we begin to see some serious danger, as these entities you're definitely going to want to keep a lot of distance between you and them, otherwise you're for sure not making it out. Ones like the Needle, who I shouldn't have to explain why this thing ramming you would be bad, the Goblin Shark entity, all of the various slashers including the Fencer, the Woman on the Bus, and if you're around lakes, the Hag. Not to mention, if you see a group of pale-faced men dressed in black with handsaws, it's likely the Piecemeal Men, and you definitely should turn around unless you want them to cut your knuckles and various limbs off. Sleepwalkers appear like the old men and women from nursing homes, but they definitely are anything but, being closer to crickets than human. The nervous house guest shows up both on your and other neighbors' roofs, but it's usually fairly large, so relatively easy to see ahead of time and avoid. Inside your home wouldn't be much better though, as the homebody frequents breaking in and distracting you with his disturbing appearance, while his long arm grabs you from behind. Movie theaters often contain the theater patron or Starliner Cinema, whichever, take your pick, who again stay at least 300 feet away from, unless you want to get hunted, caught, and then dragged into an abandoned sewer system alone with it. That sounded really bad. It's gonna kill you. It's gonna kill you guys. I promise. It's gonna kill you. It's not just fucking cut that out. You start to realize avoidance might be the best bet with these things, as if you keep your distance, they're likely to keep theirs. But the next section is where things switch up a little bit. As everything I've talked about so far, those entities will exist on a scale that we can at least comprehend. Yes, they're dangerous, but at least they can operate in a world that we recognize. And what comes next doesn't necessarily work that way.
Level 5. Giants.
So everything that we've mentioned so far is either going to be something you can view or something that you can at least sort of get away from if you want to. But the thing about this next section is they no longer exist on a human or even humanoid scale. These entities aren't really dangerous because they have malintent or even really want to kill you. A lot of those share that with the harmless category. They don't really have to want to kill you for you to end up a stain on the sidewalk. I'm of course referring to the giant. You know, the entities that are so incomprehensibly massive that you could be crushed without them ever even knowing you existed. Take the Wandering Faith for an example. A creature that's so tall, its body disappears into the cloud, and you can only really see its legs moving across the landscape like living skyscrapers. The Wandering Faith really just has one goal: finding the people it calls worthy and then sending them up into the sky, which I don't know if that's, depending on how much you trust this thing, could mean you go to heaven, and it could also mean you just, die like a fucking mile away. But at the same time, for every person that it deems worthy and is looking to go find, there's probably another 1,000 people that it just steps on, leveling city blocks without it even realizing. Every human is essentially an ant to this thing, and it for sure doesn't give a fuck about collateral damage. The shockwave alone from its footfall would likely rupture your organ. The Wandering Doom operates in a very similar way. It's essentially just another giant that walks endlessly, crushing everything beneath it without thought or intention, and then having a sort of aura of destruction that just seems to follow it everywhere. Then you have the Birdwatcher. And really think about the scale here. When you're looking up at this thing, if you were anywhere near it, you would be looking up and not even able to comprehend how tall this thing was. I doubt you would even see the top of it unless you were like 30 miles away. It just appears to be some sort of massive humanoid figure, but its proportions are wrong in ways that make you feel sick. That something like that can even exist. It mostly just stands there watching whatever the hell is in the air at that level, thus its name. But whenever it does decide to move, if you're not completely evacuated like the others, you would just be turned to fucking dust. The mushroom crab is another one, an absolutely massive crab-like creature covered in fungal growths that appear to wander aimlessly. Based on the description, there seems to be multiple of these things wandering around. But as we've seen in all the other ones, even aimlessly walking can cause large amounts of damage, not even needing an attack just because they used to live where it wanted to walk. The wildfire giants are especially terrifying because they don't just destroy through size, they usually appear around wildfires or on wildfire cameras. And I don't know about you, but I would assume that most of us are made of a very flammable material. So having to deal with a giant wildfire, along with, the giant entity crushing your entire town, would make for a very bad weekend. Then there's the behemoth, possibly the largest of them all. A creature that looks like some sort of enormous reptilian monster that lived underground near mountains. And I'm talking like hundreds of miles in size here. When this thing decides to surface, it doesn't just break through the ground, it pushes through an entire mountain range. The image we have shows it's just its head emerging, and it's already taller than the whole mountain, which, as I've confirmed in the other video, is one of the largest mountains on Earth in Hawaii. And could you guys imagine the bite force of something that size? It could be hundreds of millions millions of PSI. That basically allows it to bite through anything. It could probably eat all of New York, just casually. That's like hundreds of millions of people gone in an instant. Not to mention, if this thing has a noise it emits, it likely would shatter everyone's ears if it didn't like break windows and destroy buildings with just the noise. But here's what really fucks me up when I think about it. Likely, when it does eat something, because it likely needs to, it's just eating the Earth. It probably doesn't even realize that humans exist. It probably just differentiates like normal Earth and then weird city-like Earth, and then just fucking picks one and then just levels a city. Breaking news is another one, a massive entity that appears during broadcasts, towering over cities alongside the giant with red dots, who a lot of people surprisingly theorize that they're the same thing. These ones aren't as big, but they're more known to attack cities on purpose, which is almost worse in some ways. You can't really even fight something that big. I don't think any military on Earth could. I mean, maybe if you just threw a nuke at it, but that would be, you know, we'd have bigger problems at that point. Your only hope is to really pray it just goes somewhere else and that you're not in its walking path. And if you are, knowing ahead of the time and moving out of the way and evacuating the area like they did in the city with the birdwatcher description. The worst part of this category though is that there are a lot of giants. Like compared to all the other ones and based on how dangerous they are, Trevor has stated in the past that the giants make up a specific verse and that they literally just one day flooded into Earth and started like a war or something. Meaning if all these things are in the same area, this would likely be something that everyone has to experience, not just a rare here and there. Honestly, they might actually outnumber every other entity type, which means that they're going to be a constant threat, and likely, statistically, in your lifetime, you're going to have to deal with one.
Level 6. Run.
So now we've covered entities that aren't a threat, ones that you can keep your distance from, ones that are so big that your survival is basically just luck. But now that we're in level 6, we're going to be going over entities that will be actively hunting you. Most of them are just like you happen to run into them at some point, but these will come to you, likely forcing you to run and just hope you're faster than it. And while that might sound dramatic, I don't think you'll blame me for saying that when you see this thing in a dark alley at night and realize it's been following you for the last 10 blocks. Starting with probably the most famous of all Trevor's creatures, Siren Head, a 40-foot tall humanoid monster with sirens for a head that can essentially mimic any sound, including human voices. And Siren Head is known for hunting people for a extremely long distance. It will use the voices of your loved ones to lure you closer or play some sort of emergency broadcast to make you think help is coming, and then by the time you fully realize what's happening and you see it, it's often way too late. And you would assume it would be slow based on its size, but it is known to be as fast as cars. It can essentially cover ground in seconds, and then when it catches you, well, you likely are just going to hear the screams of its previous victims as it crushes your skull. The body of the pig is another one that you definitely need to run from immediately. This is some sort of supernatural being that has wrinkly pig skin and a pig's head. And what makes this one dangerous is it being supernatural. It doesn't really conform to like walls or stairs the way you would, so you'd be dealing with something that can phase through surfaces and catch you a lot easier than anything else. Not to mention, it is said to have near human-like intelligence, meaning it knows how to properly trap you. People who've encountered it have reported hearing it say, "I have the body of a pig," which is where the name comes from, right before it then charges you. It has also been known to move on its arms when it charges, like some sort of fucked up spider. You likely aren't going to be able to outrun this thing forever, but running is honestly your best option here. The bridge worm is exactly what it sounds like, a massive worm-like creature that hides under bridges. But here's what makes it so dangerous. You likely aren't going to see it or realize it's a threat until it's too late, similar to Siren Head. Picture you walking across a bridge. Maybe you hear something beneath you, and then this thing suddenly erupts from the side, its mouth lined with rows of teeth and its body long enough to wrap around the entire bridge structure. If you're on foot when this happens, you would need to run to either end immediately, because once it starts pulling itself up, there's nowhere to go but down. Not to mention, even if you are already beneath the bridge, it has a flap over its face that'll make it look sort of cute and non-threatening, only to reveal that it's much more disturbing beneath that flap. The dove is probably one of the most deceptive entities on this list because from a distance it just looks like a very common and elegant white bird. But then when you start to get closer, especially at night, you start to see a much larger silhouette of what appears to be a tentacled entity with just a bird-shaped head. This entity appears mostly in suburban areas, and it moves with this unnatural gliding motion that honestly shouldn't be possible for something like that. And while we don't know exactly what it does to its victims, we can probably assume that anything that comes close enough and falls for its illusion is probably never seen again. Mr. Mascot Mascot and Mr. Bags are two other entities that both just appear randomly at night. Mr. Mascot looks like a horrific children's character or a school mascot, thus the name Come to Life, and it's said to essentially house the spirit and dead body of the person who used to wear it after they died inside of it. And I feel like I need to mention again that this thing's like 9 feet tall. You know, just let that sink in. Alternatively, Mr. Bags is a gigantic figure made of trash bags with a little face towards the top. Both of them tend to hide in dark areas such as like alleyways or old roads, and both of them pursue their targets with a single-minded focus. And there's something about the way that they move. It seems jerky and wrong, and it immediately triggers every instinct that you have to run, or in the case of Mr. Mascot, drive away. But honestly, I wouldn't even feel safe around this thing if I was in a car. The Stranger is an entity that always seems to appear in your peripheral vision, always just at the edge of sight when you're inside of, say, a grocery store or other building late at night. Once it catches you as the last one in the store, a lot of the times it is known to induce disorientation, and even when you do notice it, it takes advantage of your attention to mess with you. You can honestly try to run, but there's a good chance that you'll be so disoriented due to its effects that you will never make it out of the store, even though it seems pretty straightforward when you walked in. The Man in the Red Room is one that I probably could have put in the section earlier where it was very situational, except it's a little bit different, as while he originally does stay in this one area that I theorized is in Savannah, Georgia, once someone does get there, he often will call to people in their dreams, and then once someone does arrive there, he can manipulate them, or more realistically, just chase them out of the building and hoping they forget to shut the door behind them, finally letting him free and assumably into all the surrounding areas, making him have the potential to be a lot more dangerous than any of the things I've talked about earlier in this video. And finally, in this category, there's the Fetid King, an entity that appears as a rotting figure covered in decay, emitting from your devices. It will start out as a sort of virus that just repeats the same phrase, the Fetid King is coming, until eventually he will start emitting from every screen in your house. And it's really hard to fight this just on the pure scale of things it can move through. You basically have to destroy every single device in your house, otherwise you're cooked. With all of these entities though, you have a chance, albeit slight, depending on how athletic you are, of getting away from it or surviving to tell the tale, or just surviving in general. But when it comes to the final category, that's not even an option.
Level 7. Too late.
In this category, running doesn't even matter. You have about the same chance in surviving one of these entities as you do, say, surviving a tsunami when you're right on the fucking beach. You might as well just sit there and like accept it, because the power and abilities of these things, they're not even fair. They're not designed for you to escape it. They're designed for you just to like get culled like cattle, and there isn't really any plan that can save you from them. Thankfully though, there's only really a few that fit this category. Starting with the man with the upside down face, which is an entity that essentially appears as a normal person, but their face is upside down. But a lot of the time, you won't even see them. He's invisible to most people, except for the exception of maybe Kid. People don't choose to encounter this thing. They kind of just die in a horrible accident, thinking it's just, you know, nature hating them, only to realize that the picture, only for their, I won't say them, I'll say their loved ones, to realize that there was something in the picture that was taken right before their accident. So basically, you never even knew it was there, but he always was. He's also described to be one of the evilest of all the entities, basically going anywhere it wants to in an instant and causing horrible accidents, often to huge groups of people at once too. Although even it's technically not the most powerful of Trevor's entity. That would have to go to Cartoon Cat, as it was stated by Trevor himself to be the case. It's essentially a creature that looks like a 1930s cartoon character come to life, but it's wrong in every single way. It's too tall, too flexible, moving in ways that don't make physical sense, and in being a cartoon, it basically has reality bending power. It can appear anywhere, it can change its size, it can alter the environment around it, but what makes it truly unstoppable is the fact that it enjoys the hunt. It doesn't just kill you instantly and get it over with. It will purposely let you run away, even though it knows it can for sure catch you, and then wait until you think you've escaped, only for it to just come and kill you at the last second. There's not really anywhere to fight something that can manipulate reality around you. And then there's Scissors, an entity that appears as a tall humanoid figure with scissor blades for hands. And the thing about scissors is that once it's chosen your neighborhood, and specifically your home, being native to the Mayfair Watcher Society, Trevor's podcast, it basically infects an entire neighborhood, showing up almost supernaturally and then instantly wiping everyone in the house. And finally, for this video, we have the Forgotten Baby, aka the Pink Man. I would say, in my opinion, the Forgotten Baby is the most disturbing in all of the Trevor Henderson mythos, because on top of the fact that they're entities, like I mentioned, like the man with the upside down face and Cartoon Cat, but they're not really, I mean, I might get a lot of hate for saying this, but they're not really the most scary, I would say. But the Forgotten Baby kind of combines it both. It's very disturbing and it's also very OP. To start, first of all, when it does arrive in your house, you don't hear it at all. It's basically described as a muted TV channel, and it can sneak through your doors and around your house while you're sleeping, and you wouldn't even wake up. Honestly, you would be lucky if you even managed to wake up before it attacked you. The image it's in usually portrays you seeing it in a crack through a doorway, or it walking into your room. It's basically this gigantic, weird, deformed creature with pink skin. And the second you see this thing, you would likely immediately forget how to breathe. Your heart would beat out of your chest, and you wouldn't even be able to register what you were looking at, as it just slowly walks closer and then takes you. No one really knows what happens and how it actually specifically ends you, just the fact that it just takes you from your house and then you're gone. It's as simple and as terrifying as that. And with that, there's something you really need to understand about all of these entities, and that's that there are many fates that are worse than death. A lot of them represent inevitability, on how one day you could just be walking down the street, minding your own business, and then you could be instantly thrown into a situation that the odds are immediately stacked against you. Especially with level 7, where basically if they decide you're dead, you're dead. And Trevor Henderson's worlds are just full of things like that. And all of these entities in one universe would be unreal. And if you're curious what that would look like or how to survive such a thing, I've made videos covering both of these topics along with tons of other horror creators on my front channel. And if you decide to go give another one of my videos a watch, thank you, I appreciate it.